OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
7:30 on this Thursday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. It's Eoin and Adrian with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. And a fairly stacked show between now and then. We've got Andy Moran joining us to chat through about his gym and how the whole industry is getting back on its feet at the moment. Of course, June 29th to July 20th. They're still up in the air about when they're coming back, but Andy Moran is hopeful and he'll chat to us about how he's set up for that later on this month. Stuey Byrne will be with us to chat through his new album, and in our Premier League best case, worst case scenarios this morning, we're covering Liverpool, Manchester City and Manchester United. So it's three heavy hitters in the company of Stephen Doyle. And then also we're going to be joined by Armando Bo. You might recognise his name as the co-writer of Birdman, which won all those Oscars. He has created El Presidente, which is the new Amazon show on the 2015 FIFA corruption scandal. It is basically the death of Stalin, but for football. It is a complete parody. It is hilarious. It is brilliant. And Armando Bo will be with us before 10 o'clock this morning to chat through that. Adrian, how are you?
Good on. How are you getting on? Nice sort of heavy topics to get into today.
It's quite an array of things. We've got a footballer who's released an album. We've got the FIFA corruption scandal. We've got gyms, which is the nice thing. We've got a certain member of Irish society on the front and back of a lot of Irish newspapers this morning. And we've also got a story coming from the States that the Confederate flag has been banned from NASCAR events. Where do you want to start this morning?
Gyms reopening. Not a bit of it. Look, there is plenty to get into, and it's right across the back pages and some of the front pages as well this morning, as it turns out. The Confederate flag is an interesting one, isn't it? It's this story popped up last night that NASCAR, not a sport I know a huge amount about, but had taken the decision to ban the Confederate flag from its race meets, which is it's great news. It got me thinking when it cropped up last night about our own relationship with the exact same flag. Everybody will remember it, I'm sure, in 2017, where this became a really hot topic around Cork GAA fans bringing it to matches, and whether that was the right or wrong thing to do. It was a massive conversation at the time. It dominated everything. I remember the number of conversations we had about it at the time, and the level of feeling around the country in terms of whether people felt it should be something that's permitted or not. And I had to do a bit of a Google last night because I couldn't, for the life of me, remember exactly how the whole thing sorted itself. Well, it didn't, is really the major conclusion I can come to. It all just seemed to go really quiet.
It's a great shout. I'd totally forgotten that this was still up in the air, over the last couple of years, that this hadn't actually had a pin put in it as such. There was a good reaction by people within Cork GAA, like even just looking back at some of the content from the Examiner from August 2017. There was a letter to the Examiner signed by Rena Buckley, Paddy Murray, Peadar Healy, and Paul Kerrigan. They all would have been central figures with Cork camogie, women's football and hurling as well at the time. Like, this is completely changed now in today's society, where today's society comparing 2020 to 2017 seems incredible, but given the tone of everything over the last week, especially when there have been a number of statues pulled down and the symbolism is something that's been brought into question, it would be very interesting if there was a concurrent GAA championship happening and one of these appeared. But the last word you had from Cork GAA was the condemnation. I'm not sure was there a wide GAA condemnation or a banning of these things either. I think there was a general sense that it would be impossible to ban them.
And maybe the better thing is that it becomes socially unacceptable to bring one to a game, and maybe that's what's happened here. Because I in my bit of googling around last night, I couldn't find any recent examples of a Confederate flag at a game. So maybe people just get shamed enough into bringing it. But and that is that point that you're making there, in terms of the symbolism of whether it is something like flags or language or whatever it might be, that we don't get, because that was the thing at the time. Do you remember? It was the people who were defending its right to be at a game were listen, that's not what it means for us. For us, it's we're the rebel county, and it's red and white and all this kind of bullshit, as opposed to it's actually a hugely offensive symbol to a lot of people, and on that basis. So that's the thing really, I suppose, around symbols and language, not really so much what your intention of using that language or that symbol is, as opposed to how somebody might perceive it, and you don't get to decide that. But it will, so I'm assuming that the whole thing died down. They haven't reappeared at games is really what my conclusion out of last night, because you would have to assume that in the context of 2020 that if that were to be the case, whenever games get back up and running and fans are actually allowed back in, that it would have to be a pretty swift statement at this point, wouldn't it, from Croke Park? Like, there's no room now really for I'm trying to think of another phrase other than pissing about, but that's as
I couldn't see it. I couldn't see anything but a swift condemnation from Croke Park as well if it were to happen. Like 2017 and the context of it here, just doing a quick bit of reading up in it this morning, that was Charlottesville time. This is why it came up, and this is why we were having conversations about it in GEA, much the same as we're having now, when everything that's been sparked in the United States has kicked off correctly our own conversations about that very subject in this country, and we've naturally projected that onto ourselves in a good way, I think. Like, there's two things here. There's one thing that people don't really bring flags to games anymore, so that when somebody does bring a Confederate flag, it's for two reasons. Like, somebody has a flag and, oh my God, they have a Confederate flag in their hand. But I'd completely forgotten the reasoning that there was a rebel element to it. Like, I got the red and white thing, but there was actually a case put forward that it was more than just the red and white connection. I
remember on the texts that came in and tweets, etc. at that time, and some of them you just would not believe. In fact, if we could do a bit of it's probably not worth the rage you end up getting yourself into search these things, but I remember at the time, you assume now sitting here that most people were reasonable people were like, listen, fair enough, it's very offensive to people, let's just not go there. But Jesus, no, very much a lot of people defending it. Like and it is interesting when you, like the conversation that we had which is a really enlightening conversation with Aaron Cunningham last week, like in terms of the definition of racism. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people out there, I think there's plenty of people who still probably just don't get it. And an interesting piece with Chris Hughton in The Guardian yesterday actually as well on the topic about the whole thing and the opportunity, right? Like, you're talking about Charlottesville, and you would have assumed at that point that actually there's a global momentum here to actually do something about it that never really materialised. But listen to Aaron last week, reading that piece with Chris Hughton yesterday, there's a lot of people saying that actually this is the moment of a generation, and now is the opportunity to actually finally do something about this.
It feels different, doesn't it? And just to bring you up to speed, if you did miss that last night, the story we're chatting about is that NASCAR have banned Confederate flags from all tracks due to associations with slavery. So that came out last night from the States. Right, we've got plenty more to get into this morning, from that story to our next story, and we're going to play you some of last night's Off the Ball on this particular subject. Kieran Cunningham from the Irish Daily Star was on last night's show speaking about Daniel Kinahan's involvement in what is due to be the biggest fight in UK boxing history.
So, as I'm sure you've seen at this stage, Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua will happen next year, and it will happen twice at that. Confirmation has come in a few forms. Eddie Hearn told Sky Sports News there's still a lot to overcome. We're looking at venues and dates, but it's fair to say they are in agreement regarding the financial terms of the fight. And then earlier on this afternoon, Tyson Fury took to Instagram.
Hello there. I'm just after getting off the phone with Daniel Kinahan. He's just informed me that the biggest fight in British boxing history has just been agreed. Get up there, my boy! Big shout out, Dan. He got this done. Literally over the line. 2-fight deal. Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua next year. One problem. I just got to smash Deontay Wilder's face right in the next fight. And then we go into the Joshua fight next year. So there we are. The Gypsy King versus AJ is on for next year, but there's a hurdle in the road called the Bronze Bomber, aka the Knockout King, and I will get onto him and knock him spark out, and then we go on to the big fight. So big thank you, Dan, for getting this deal over the line. All the best. God bless you all. See you soon. Peace out.
Now, for more, we're joined by Kieran Cunningham, Chief Sports Writer with the Irish Daily Star. How are you doing, Kieran?
Good, Joe, thanks.
3 mentions there of Daniel Kinahan in that 2-minute Tyson Fury announcement. It's quite surreal to see it in many respects as well. We've been talking about this situation in particular for maybe the guts of a month, and this is the culmination of all the work in the background. And Daniel Kinahan, according to Tyson Fury himself, is the man who has put this absolutely historically huge fight together.
Yeah. We don't need to explain who Daniel Kinahan is. Unless you've been living under a rock for years, you'll know by now. There's even been a book written on him. There's been a huge amount of coverage. The stuff is out there around him. You can make up your own mind what you make of him. And this is the culmination of what's been happening over about 4 months now, Joe. And it's clear that this has been part of a game, that a game has been played that to get Daniel Kinahan into the position where he becomes a major power broker in the world of boxing. And, that started when you had that surreal rap video that was spreading conspiracy theory around the Regency shooting. A documentary came. It was Bob Arum described him as a captain, advisor, and the guy who makes things happen in the Middle East. He went back, MTK Global, which he had founded, took him back in as an advisor. He was announced as an advisor to KHK Sports in Bahrain as well, which is heavily bankrolled by the very wealthy royal family in that country. So now he's brokered, effectively Daniel Kinahan has made this fight, according to Tyson Fury, which is interesting now that the Instagram posts have been edited since then to remove references to Daniel Kinahan, which adds to the extraordinary nature of the story. It's very, very damaging for boxing, and it makes us question where boxing is going.
Who made the edits? Tyson Fury himself?
I have no idea. But
okay, but on Fury's account, it's been edited?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
I believe so. Yeah. You can look into that. No, but in recent weeks, some in the US boxing media have looked into this story because it's been striking that the coverage in Ireland has been mostly done by crime correspondents, and then there's been a bit in the sports media as well. UK have largely ignored it, and the US up to a few weeks. But now the UK, some prominent journalists in the US have looked into it. And I wonder now, is the Streisand effect that will come into play? I don't know if you know about the Streisand effect, Joe, but that was going back to a story around Barbara Streisand that was coming out back in the late 70s, I think. And she wanted to suppress it. But trying to suppress it made people more interested in the story and looking into it more. So I've seen today, people like Matt Dickinson in the Times in London, linking stories from Irish newspapers with Daniel Kinahan. I know Piers Morgan has started taking interest in it. It was interesting. Gary Lineker tweeted about that he was excited about this fight. And a lot of people got back to him and said, Google Daniel Kinahan. He later deleted the tweet saying yes. And he said, I've been reading into it. It's very interesting. So I think now, when these press conferences come around for this fight, if and when it happens, I think the media have to start asking questions, because nobody can ignore the questions anymore. They've been highlighted so much that you're not doing your job if you don't start asking.
What's been so extraordinary about the last month is that it's almost been the opposite of trying to suppress his involvement. It's almost been like a coming out party. I mean, choreographed by all the major stakeholders in the boxing world. Bob Arum came out. That was the first big one that caught my eye, and he talked about how Daniel was the captain, and he made the point that Kinahan was the go-to man in the Middle East, i.e. that Joshua's side and Fury's side had said, well, Daniel Kinahan is going to be our go-to man, come to him with all offers and we'll sit back. And that, it's an incredibly significant position. And then Sandra Vaughan came out of MTK, which up until 2017 officially Daniel Kinahan was owner of, and then sold it to Vaughan. And from that point on, they were adamant there was no official involvement. She, around the same week as Arum, came out with a video. And despite the fact that we're operating under some of the most stringent defamatory laws in the world, she talked about effectively the begrudgery of the media in the Republic and how, they almost couldn't even look on a daily basis at what has been written about Daniel Kinahan in the Irish media. Here's a clip just to jog people's memory, for instance, where she talks about almost the begrudgery and this kind of rags to riches story of Kinahan as she tried to present it.
They really need to suck it up, because where they can write about whatever it is that they write about, all this crazy, just crazy stuff. It's just absolutely insane. They want to continue to write that. They're going to have to, at some point, acknowledge the fact that, as I say, whether they like it or not, people like Bob Arum, the Prince of Bahrain, all the Frank, Eddie, all these big fights will happen because of Daniel Kinahan, right? So that's fact. The other part's fiction. So I don't know if it's the Irish mentality, but at some point, would you not be proud that someone from inner city Dublin is actually sitting at the table with that level of organisation like the Prince of Bahrain or Bob Arum, Eddie, and making history, making fights, something that MTK is not within the organisation even got the qualifications to pull something like that off. You know, he is in amongst all of that. Now, for Ireland, would you not be proud of that?
So that was Sandra Vaughan. That was the same week as Bob Arum. And then that same week again, Kinahan was appointed special advisor to KHK Sports, which is a sports company in Bahrain, effectively working with the Bahrain royal family. And then you mentioned there was the rap, and then there was the Regency video, which was on YouTube for a time and effectively portrayed the Regency shooting as a government conspiracy of sorts, a Fine Gael effort to damage Sinn Féin in the upcoming general election.
It was Fine Gael, the media, and the Guards conspired to make Fine Gael win the election.
And, you know, and there were like reasonably good production values around this. Money had been spent, and you know, the hashtag Truth About Regency was going on Twitter, and it was. The hashtag went it was posted 300 times. The majority of those Twitter posts came from abroad and by accounts which had only been set up in the last 2 months. So my point on all of this, by the way, I'm just rejogging people's memory as well as making a point to you. The Streisand suppression phenomenon I take, and yet, and it follows today with the Fury announcement, because it was very avoidable for him to mention Daniel Kinahan. Whatever was happening up until 2 months ago, if there was an element of suppression here to the extent of his involvement, that has now been dropped, and he has been pushed to the fore, and could not have been pushed to the fore in a more brazen way.
No, because I wrote about this the other day, Joe, and what I'm convinced is happening here is, if you look at the world of boxing now, Bob Arum, who has been a huge figure for over 50 years, is 88. Don King is 88. Al Heyman, been very influential in boxing over the years, he's 65, which was a traditional retirement age. And what people have to understand about Daniel Kinahan, as well as all the other things that surround him, he is obsessed with boxing, and he wants to be the king of boxing. He wants to be the equivalent of a Don King and a Bob Arum. And I think he sees a vacuum coming to be the main power broker in the world of boxing because of the profile and the age of the people who have been running the sport for a long, long time. And brokering a deal like this pushes him right up there. Because the figures that have been mentioned around this fight, like there's so much hype around boxing, you take so much of it with a pinch of salt. And Tyson Fury said it'll be the biggest fight in British boxing history. In monetary terms, he's right. Like the purses will be ridiculous. Like $500 million has been mentioned already. So from that point of view, you know, people who love the sport have to really wonder where the sport is going now. Because you know, you look through all the governing bodies, IBF, WBC, WBA, WBO. Have they any concerns with Daniel Kinahan's involvement? Have any of the TV companies who've thrown huge money at boxing any concern about Daniel Kinahan's involvement? Here in Ireland, half of Ireland's boxing medals, over half ever, at the Olympic level have come in boxing. At European and world level, boxing is Ireland's most successful sport. But in recent, a couple of nights ago, you had a firebombing at a gym in Ballyfermot where some MTK boxers sometimes train. In the last few years, you've had shootings outside Boxers National Stadium, at a boxing club in Bray, and at a boxing weigh-in. In 2 of those shootings, 2 people died. So in many people's minds now, boxing is toxic. They don't want anything to do with boxing. The most significant figure in Irish boxing, 35 years ago, Barry McGuigan became world champion. It used to be Barry McGuigan. It was Michael Carruth. It was Steve Collins. Now it's Daniel Kinahan. And that should really concern people.
A question jumping out at me over the last 2 months is, how has this happened? You know, so Bob Arum was asked about this, and he said, well, I'm just staying in my lane. You know, I'm just looking after the boxing. It's not my concern, Daniel Kinahan's business. He was asked about it. He said, it's not my concern. I'm staying in my lane. You mentioned the various. So that's maybe the money side of the business. The people who run things from a fighter's perspective or a promotion perspective. So they're after the bottom line. Then there's the media, which undoubtedly have not made a big enough deal of this, and you've made that point. And then there are the governing bodies. Okay, so the Bob Arum grouping, I understand. The media, I understand. The governing bodies, or like if this was soccer, we'd be saying, well, what are FIFA doing? If this was a
absolutely.
GAA story, what are GAA doing? Who controls boxing? Who is the person or the organisation or the board that should be doing some kind of fit and proper person test, for instance?
Yeah, well, a couple of weeks ago, I took part in a podcast in the Ring magazine with Kurt Imhoff. And Kurt would be an attorney in New York who's managed world champion boxers for 20 years. And he'd be very much, he knows the world of boxing well. And it's a drum he's been banging for a long time, that it basically needs one international governing body that has credibility and that's above board and that you can trust and that will judge things properly. But as things stand now, if you have an issue with Daniel Kinahan's involvement in the sport, who do you actually go to? You know, when you have so many governing bodies and so many governing bodies that operate with a very light touch, that to the outsider, it does look like just money is all that matters in boxing, that nobody else seems to care about where money comes from in any instance. You know, this isn't, you know, this go back through, there's other individuals been involved with boxing that over the years that, you know, a lot of other sports wouldn't touch. But boxing seems to give you a free pass. And that's an issue. But I think it's particularly concerning now because it's not like anybody could claim to be in the dark when so much has been put out there about Daniel Kinahan. Yeah. So many questions have been asked.
Yes, I mean, it's been talked about a lot in this country over the last couple of months. I think it would appear that his global reputation is what he's very concerned with. I mean, this is a tiny island, a couple of million people, and who knows if he ever plans to return. But on a global scale, it does seem as if Daniel Kinahan wants to be a major player in boxing on a global scale for years to come. So his reputation in that regard, I mean, it remains to be seen. It remains to be seen. That's interesting, some of the stuff. Even people like Gary Lineker, for whatever cachet they have or influence they have, are maybe they're being pointed in the direction of our reservations. But ultimately, I mean, if it was if it was a Russian person who we might have had similar reservations about who had put this fight together, how exercised would you be? Honestly, and this is an Irish story and it's a big deal, but from a global perspective, how exercised is the boxing world going to get about this? As you said, plenty of shady characters down the years. Daniel Kinahan's never had any criminal convictions, I state that again. But it looks to me as if you're right, as if there is a vacuum there, and it's going to be very interesting to see if this becomes a significant issue in the global media over the coming 2, 3, 4 months. Because, look, once this fight happens, eyeballs are on it no matter what.
Yeah, well, I think what's very interesting there, Joe, is how this goes down in the UK. There's 2 British fighters, and the UK media haven't really touched it. But as I was saying earlier, some have been tweeting about it today and thinking, oh, this looks interesting, and maybe we'll look into this a bit. And I think because of that, no, I don't think there's going to be huge coverage of this in Russia or Australia, or even to the extent that it should be in the US. But I have a feeling it's a story that's going to take off a little bit in the UK. Okay. Because I think it has to. Because when you have Eddie Hearn there, yes, you have the 2 boxers there. You know, it's a big British story. Yeah. So from that point of view, it could damage a lot of people within boxing if a lot of stuff around this fight is highlighted.
Yeah, because you threw me a touch with your sense that the Fury announcement was edited slightly, because on the BBC tweet, certainly that tweet cuts out the start, which is I'm just off the phone with Daniel Kinahan. It just starts with Fury talking about the fight. And then he references Dan a few seconds in. And actually the journalists and both of us would kind of wince, because who's Dan if someone's coming to this tweet fresh? Whereas if he's been identified 10 seconds earlier, you absolutely would leave that in. So it was a very pointed edit there on the BBC tweet. Anyway, that didn't just happen.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah.
It's strange. It's everything, you know, it all feeds into what's happened the last few years. You know, that it was unthinkable that Boris Johnson would be Prime Minister. It was unthinkable that Donald Trump would be US President. But they become normalised. And now Daniel Kinahan has become normalised inside one of the biggest global sports around. And, you know, you wonder what's next. Like, is anyone going to shout stop? Like, because I think the people in Irish boxing who really care about Irish boxing have to get together and have to think of a way of fighting back and giving an option that means you don't have to work with a company linked to Daniel Kinahan, because sponsors and the wider public and the media are losing faith big time with boxing.
Kieran Cunningham of the Irish Daily Star. We'll leave it there, Kieran. Thanks so much.
No problem.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Looking for a football show with a bit of a twist?
So I know the likes of Griezmann's big into his fashion.
You wanted a lot. One question he actually asked me was, could he make his studs light up when he runs?
Team 33, the football magazine show for the football purists.
Yeah, the Nike Mercurials from 1998, if you just show that boot to an entire generation of people, and they just get instantly nostalgic and remember everything from that era.
The very best interviews with the cult heroes of the past, and a look at the cultural side of football. Team 33, live at 9 p.m. every Friday on OTB Sports Radio. Live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Missing this?
This is the dream. Shohee on Fringlode. Whether you're from Cushendall in Antrim or Mount Sion in Waterford, this is what it's all about.
And get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
OTB AM.
You're welcome back. That full piece with Daniel Kinahan, or with Kieran Cunningham on Daniel Kinahan, I should say, is available on youtube.com/Off the Ball right now. All the comments as well available on offtheball.com, and this Kinahan story is covered across the back pages and the front pages, I think it's fair to say, this morning. We'll get into that in just a moment. We're going to be joined by Sheahan in just a moment for the morning's sports news. Adrian is with us as ever until 10 o'clock for the morning. We've also got Andy Moran coming up in just a moment. Adrian, are you buzzing for the return of gyms, or at least in your view the return of the trusted swimming pool, which is where we spent most of our days before this whole thing happened?
If ever there was a leading question on am I buzzing for the return of gyms, absolutely not. Yeah, swimming pools would be good to get back into. No question about that. All that good work we've done is now totally pointless.
It totally is. Like, I'm not sure had we got to a level where we can now just wade on back into the swimming pool and say, look, we can count on all our previous experience and just flow through a few lengths and actually get back to that level again.
I don't think so. I think, I don't know, Wade, certainly in my case, Waddle back in, I would think is probably what's going to happen at some point when, I haven't heard anything about swimming pools reopening. So I don't know, we're going to see. But yeah, it does feel like, I don't know. If you followed my Twitter account on, you've seen that I did try to keep up my swimming activity during the lockdown. Difficult enough, I suppose, in the 3 metre sort of paddling pool, kind of difficult enough. You could jump back in the sea, of course. I think that if you lived close enough to the sea, and now obviously as long as you're not in probably Laois. Is Laois the only county that doesn't have some sort of a coastline?
There's
you're
a few
still
more.
with. Well, yeah, fair enough. I'm from one, actually, as it turns out. There are a few more. Right, so yeah, you could just dip back in the sea or a lake, I suppose.
That is the way to do it. Tipperary, of course. I can hear Tipperary people coming our way straight away. Yeah. Have you not hopped in the sea for a dip, considering you did the sea leg of a triathlon last year? That's
primarily why I'm not getting back in. It's bloody freezing. To be fair, like, it's been so nice here over not the last couple of days, but the preceding ones before that. Yeah, and even for the head, like, it's a great thing to do, to jump in and give yourself that bit of a shock. But I've just been kind of reluctant to go there, because on the basis of, like, you don't want to be in the middle of a lot of people congregating at these things, and living in Dublin, it's hard to find, like, you see people on social media sort of posting, I've just found this secluded beach, there's literally nobody else here. It's not really an option around here. But yeah, I've seen people doing it during the week and thought, I've missed out on something there, I must try and see if I can do that. Maybe if I get the wetsuit on. I'm chicken when it comes to this stuff on. That's the short story.
Sheahan, a very good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How are you getting on? Monaghan also does not have a coastline, so
there you go.
I was also at a severe disadvantage.
So no swimming for you over the last little while. Are you hopping on this Are you doing the run and bike?
I sure am, and it's only because
run and ride.
Run and ride.
I did start my runs last night and broke my 5k record. So I wasn't going to bring it up. I wasn't going to brag, but you brought it up, so I'm more than happy to talk about it.
Jumping into my mind there, Shane, is that you have a 5k record. What's going on?
Yeah, I managed to break 20 minutes about a year ago. And I decided yesterday was the perfect temperature for running here in Monaghan. We have less pollution, less smoke than up in Dublin. So I figured I could get sub 19 minutes. Did 18:54 yesterday around the greenways of the Ulster Canalway in Monaghan town. So I'm ready to go.
Sorry, that's your 5k.
That's my 5k run. So I wanted to get off to a really good start. It'll be all downhill from here, but I wanted to really impress the coach, be the teacher's pet,
A young fit buck like you'll be taking on the expert level. That's not our lads like me doing the short distances.
Sorry to interrupt. If you type in world record 5 kilometre time into Google, anything to do with 5 kilometres, there's a load of questions here. Is 5k in 30 minutes good? Is 5k in 25 minutes good? Is 5k in 24 minutes good? Is 5k in 21 minutes good? This is what the general population of the world is asking, and you are smashing these questions.
But I think if you look at the actual world record, it's like 12 or 13 minutes, I think. So that brings you right back down to earth. So, it's not elite, but it's pretty fast.
It's the sort of thing, Shane, that if I saw you post on Instagram, I would be like, I don't believe that.
I have the actual. I did it on Strava, so I have the physical proof, the geography, the terrain, the elevation. So I can whip that up and put it on Twitter today, no problem.
Do it. Let's do it, and there will be nobody within this team to actually challenge you. But it'll be good for you. It'll be good for your own self boost anyway.
Shane's level of endorsement of Monaghan, right, is always a thing. But the smugness of the fact that there's less smog in Monaghan than there is in Dublin, Shane, I mean that goes for every other county in the country.
Lovely clean air. Yeah, there's a little whiff of green diesel in the air, but it's still pretty clean.
What's going on this morning, Shane?
Yeah, we'll start with the news that you've heard Kieran Cunningham and Joe Malloy speak about it last night's Off the Ball, but the name of Daniel Kinahan has been front and centre to the announcement of a heavyweight unification bout. This news came in yesterday. Anthony Joshua due to meet Tyson Fury for the first time in the summer of 2021. Fury name-checked Kinahan 3 times in a short Instagram post confirming the deal, while Fury's promoter Frank Warren described Kinahan as his client's advisor. Meanwhile, in golf, the top 3 players in the world are grouped together as the PGA Tour resumes later. Rory McIlroy will play alongside John Rahm and Brooks Koepka. What a group that is for the first round of the Charles Schwab Challenge. Shane Lowry and Graham McDowell are also in action in Fort Worth this week. The tournament will be played behind closed doors. Meanwhile, the PGA Tour say they will pause at 8:46 a.m. Texas time during each round to pay their respects to George Floyd. La Liga resumes after a 13-week hiatus with the Seville derby tonight. Sevilla entertain Real Betis with kick-off at 9 p.m. Sevilla currently sit 3rd with 11 games remaining in the league, 1 point clear of 5th place Getafe in the hunt for Champions League places. There still hasn't been a single positive coronavirus test result among the 4 League of Ireland teams returning to action next month. Bohemians were the last club of the 4 to receive the all-clear from the 3rd round of testing. However, there was 1 positive test among the 1,213 tests carried out in the English Premier League this month. Meanwhile, Premier League clubs are expected to discuss their stance on players protesting against racism at today's shareholders' meeting. It's understood they'll be supportive of stars who choose to kneel when action in the top flight resumes next week. Votes will also be held on a number of other issues, such as travel to away games, in an attempt to finalise plans for the restart. Meanwhile, US soccer has overturned a ban on football players kneeling during the national anthem. That rule was introduced in 2016 after women's star Megan Rapinoe kneeled in solidarity with Colin Kaepernick, who began kneeling during the anthem in protest against racial injustice. The US Soccer Board describes its previous stance as wrong. Meanwhile, the big news that came in last night as well, the Confederate flag has been banned from all NASCAR facilities and events following the anti-racism protests in the US. Confederate flags have been a familiar sight at NASCAR races over its 72-year history. They are seen by many as a symbol of slavery and racism. You can read more on that story, including the full NASCAR statement, on otbsports.com this morning, or indeed on the brand new OTB Sports app that's available for free to download right now on the App Store or Play Store. Liverpool's mayor, Joe Anderson, says Jurgen Klopp's team will get a parade to celebrate their impending Premier League title victory at some point. The Merseysiders could clinch the trophy against rivals Everton. That's when the season resumes later this month. June 17th is the resume date for the Premier League. Anderson, though, has admitted the current coronavirus restrictions make planning an event tricky. In snooker, Ryan Day enjoyed a 3-0 victory over world champion Judd Trump in reaching the Championship League final group in Milton Keynes yesterday, behind closed doors, of course. Day joins 2015 world champion Stuart Bingham, Ben Wollaston and Luca Brissell in the final group this afternoon. And finally, for me this morning, lads, racing is in action this afternoon at Gowran Park. An 8-race card in all, the first going to post there behind closed doors at 1 o'clock.
Good stuff, Shane. Thanks for that. Let's tell you what's coming up on OTB AM this morning. Andy Moran coming your way in just 20 minutes. His gym is looking to get back open, and he's going to tell us about how they're going to do this in a safe manner. So hopefully by the end of the month, gyms will be able to reopen. It could yet be July 20th before they're open, but Andy Moran, the eternal optimist, he'll say himself. There's a good chat with him coming up, and also the benefit of gyms and exercise and our mental health. There's a Premier League recap, and we've been going A to Z on our best case, worst case for every single Premier League club before the return of the league in 6 days' time. Stephen Doyle will be with us to go through both Manchester clubs and indeed Liverpool. Stuey Byrne, if you haven't heard, has got a brand new album out. He's going to be chatting to us about that and much more as well at around 9:15. And El Presidente is the brand new Amazon show focused on the 2015 FIFA corruption scandal. It is a dramatised version. It is a hilarious dramatised version. And the creator is Armando Bo. He'll be with us for a chat at 9:45. Time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
OTBsports.com this morning leads with Kieran Cunningham and his quotes from last night's show. Daniel Kinahan wants to be the king of boxing. Fury Joshua is going ahead. The OTB Brief is now live. That is our podcast that is available before even we're live on OTB AM every single weekday morning. So it's a very early hit of headlines, and as you can imagine, the golf and that Daniel Kinahan story dominating proceedings. There is the original news story that we had up yesterday. Fury and Joshua agreed 2-fight deal according to promoter Eddie Hearn. And then, as already mentioned earlier on here on OTB AM, NASCAR bans display of Confederate flag at its race meetings. So that is OTBsports.com for you this morning.
No mention of the fight on the Irish Independent this morning. GA must think outside the box, says Nicky Brennan in his this Frank Roach piece here. Provinces may need to consider everything, says Nicky Brennan, the former president of the GA. Midweek games, fewer venues, grounds with floodlights. It seems going to become hot property. Not having the potential of some Leinster games in Thurles is specifically mentioned, which has been done before, obviously. He raised the prospect of counties as well, not having run-off club games before county teams return to training, and the headaches, obviously, that will come with that. That is the return of the GA. More on that in some of the other papers. And Rory McIlroy, Tiger was my hero. His skin colour didn't matter, writes Gareth Hanna.
Tonight is like the Masters, Adrian. It certainly feels like this is the weekend where you're going to sit down and spend a lot of time in the company of golf, because we didn't know what we had until it was gone, quite frankly.
The Charles Schwab Challenge, Owen, has never been so eagerly anticipated a tournament. Bizarrely held at a club called Colonial. It's only when we start to have all these conversations that you start to look around you at all the things that exist that possibly shouldn't. I actually had a bit of a dig around to see the context of the naming of the golf club and couldn't really find very much other than it's over 100 years old, etc., which places an interesting point in history. But yeah, the Charles Schwab Challenge, on. You'll be watching?
I was going to say that you could swap the Charles Schwab Challenge trophy for a green jacket, because given the importance I'm placing on it. But you can't do that for two reasons. One, the trophy itself is absolutely incredible. I'm not sure if you've seen it. It's got this massive winged eagle on the top of it. And second of all, I think there is an actual jacket involved in the Charles Schwab Challenge. Again, when you hear that the course name is Colonial, your eyebrows raise a small bit as well. And to be honest, I go on.
I hear it's the fifth major, Owen. I think it's what I understand. It's
yes, indeed, it is. It's vying for that position, the official title of fifth major. So that's coming up later on, and that is the main story in the Irish Examiner today. Golf back in business as Rory seeks tolerance. So some of the tee times today, you've got Justin Thomas, Ricky Fowler, Jordan Spieth teeing off at 6:55 Irish time. But like the one, Nathan's been banging them out. I'm not sure if you've been watching OTB AM all week, Adrian, but you could sense Nathan's excitement through his Skype line at this tea time. 6 minutes past 7 this evening, Rory McIlroy, Brooks Koepka and John Ram all playing together. The salivation that will be going on in the Murphy household this evening will be incredible. And then there's some earlier tea times as well. From 2:34 p.m. you've got Patrick Reed, Mark Leishman and Graham McDowell. And plenty to get your teeth stuck into, and it just all looks very, very appealing given it's been so long. A couple of other things here as well. Joe Schmidt says biennial tournament better indicator of world's best than World Cup. That's what he's been saying in his latest interview. Could we see a county final decided on penalties? Asks Larry Ryan. And an interesting piece here as well by Shane McGrath, who's always worth reading. Player power will come to the fore, but trust is now the key. So this is something that we spoke to Shane Kingston a little bit about on yesterday's show, about can you get yourself ready for inter-county football or hurling while being a full-time club player? He says no, and he also says that you can't really have interference from county teams because of the restrictions that are going to be put in place. But what McGrath's saying, to quote his piece, he says, I foresee the county player training for one night in a collective session, returning to their clubs for the rest of the week to prepare for club championship. That is while their clubs are involved. When their club is knocked out, they would, of course, become a full-time county player again. He says inter-county players have never been as educated in hydration, diet, recovery, to obtain high performance, and most importantly, to avoid injury. His one caveat here is who will actually make the call on dual players. Who will decide if a county player can play both codes with their club, perhaps football on a Saturday and hurling on a Sunday? And then his final point here is that I've heard it said we are throwing the clubs under the bus by letting them go first. I disagree. The clubs are driving the bus for now, and it may need a service along the way, and there will be bumps on the journey, but every passenger on the bus is delighted it's moving at all. So let's see where the journey takes us. He's talking a lot of sense there, and like I know I would echo the view that it is fantastic that the clubs are getting their opportunity in the spotlight, and it's no harm for the county train to be slowed down a little bit in terms of what it's become a runaway now in the last couple of years. But at the same time, there is a middle ground to be got here, especially in the latter stages of the club championship, that if the county team honestly feel that whatever it's going to be 1, 2, 3 weeks of preparation isn't enough, that perhaps one session with their club players could be something that could be looked into down the line.
I wasn't sure that transport analogy could be better done, but I think you've done it there. Yeah, I'm not sure why you couldn't. Actually, like what I would say is, isn't this a fantastic opportunity when you consider the things that we're now considering in terms of our approach to the preparation of GAA teams, training, matches, dual players, inter-county club, playing games, playing provincial Leinster games outside of Leinster, playing midweek games. Like, look at all these things that we're suddenly having conversations about, like in the context of trying to get them run off, but like the opportunity to actually maybe lean on some of those things as a structure beyond COVID. It's fantastic, and it is only something like this that gives us the opportunity to have these conversations. I don't know why you couldn't, for example, have Shane Kingston knows infinitely more about what it takes to be an inter-county and club player than I do, but I don't know why you couldn't have one night with your county and then return back to your club. Like, you're missing out on that much that can't be caught up on in terms of tactics and preparation, and maybe does that say more about where the club game is at rather than one's capacity to be able to carry that off? I don't know.
Like, I think that there is a roadmap for the future here, that there is a possibility of this becoming the new norm for GAA, that you do focus on club activity for a large swathe of the year where there's actual good weather, and still allowing the fact that the county can have you for one night a week if there is the sign of a championship, 2 months down the line. So I guess the comparison is with football and having your club as your bread and butter and then going on international duty. We would still care about the international team just as much as the club teams, even if the windows are smaller. But it's a possibility, and like, again, you and I not being involved with a club at the moment can't really speak, but it definitely seems from the outside looking in, and Shane McGrath is echoing this, that you can have the situation where you can go with your county for one night a week. Like, it's not in their interest to run the legs off you in training either. It's not in the county's interest for them to injure you in training so that you're not going to be available for your club. Like, as you say, if it's tactics, preparation, even if it's a bit of strength and conditioning early on, to have a player ready, and if that's done early in the week, 5-6 days before a championship game at your club, it could be workable. I accept that none of these solutions are ideal, but I think that we're tapping into something here where there could be a bit more of a happy marriage between club and county, which is just something that has been non-existent over the last few years.
Yeah, and I've always been of the view, and I understand it's slightly controversial, that the 1 or 2% of players who are involved in intercounty holding up the entire club season is beyond ludicrous anyway. I don't know that we'll ever move past that, given that people who are so deeply involved with these things would never want to hear of it, as in they wouldn't want their intercounty players not being available. And I kind of get that, but at the same time it's holding up the entire thing. But it is a class opportunity to trial some of these things now in the context of everything that's going on and see what we're left with at the other side. That's the Examiner own, is it?
That was the Irish Examiner, yes.
Yeah, the Times, Irish Times this morning, golf is back, and Rory looking very pleased about it on the back page of the Irish Times for you this morning. Philip Reid with the story here. And, the Charles Schwab Challenge, as we mentioned a bit earlier on, 3 months after the players was abandoned, we have full-on competitive golf. McIlroy, as Owen mentioned a bit earlier, out alongside Rahm and Koepka. And one of Spieth's favourite courses as well, so we'll see how that plays out a bit later on. And in this piece, Rory speaking about the having more racial diversity in golf, as we mentioned, as they tee it up at Colonial. That's the golf. Dave Hannigan has the story of the passing of a Chicago boxing great, Tom O'Shea. Not a name that I was familiar with, but one of 4 fighting brothers, and Tom lost on his Golden Gloves title in '58 to his brother Brian. There was 4 of them in total, and he went on, Tom, to become a professor and a highly rated amateur coach as well, and passed away this week. And a big story across the bottom there by Johnny Watterson. Fury thanks Daniel Kinahan as deal struck for Joshua fights. This is a story we touched on a bit earlier on, and the direct quote here from the Johnny Watterson piece. The deal firmly places Irishman Daniel Kinahan, who Fury publicly thanked on Instagram, among the sport's most influential figures. Kinahan's involvement in the top levels of organised crime has been accepted as fact by an Irish court, despite the 42-year-old's lack of previous convictions. So that's the story there from Johnny Watterson. It seems like only a matter of time before Daniel Kinahan, and I genuinely mean this, rocks up at a press conference to talk about the upcoming bouts. But that's the story covered in the Irish Times this morning.
Yeah, and inevitability, I think. An interesting question raised by Kieran Cunningham last night was how big the international media is going to go on this. He suspects that the UK media is going to go big on this. He's right. It is the lead story on the back of the London Times this morning. Fury says deal in place for Joshua fight. This is Rick Broadbent's piece, and it includes plenty of detail for British readers this morning on Daniel Kinahan. Anthony Joshua facing fresh controversy after... Tyson Fury, of course, facing fresh controversy after publicly thanking a man who has been accused of heading an international crime gang. In an Instagram post, the WBC heavyweight champion said he had just got off the phone to Daniel Kinahan, the founder of his management group, MTK Global. Kinahan's role as dealmaker, just to quote Broadbent, will raise eyebrows. Based in Dubai, he has no criminal record, but in 2018, the Criminal Assets Bureau told Dublin's High Court he controlled and managed operations for the Kinahan organised crime group, which smuggled drugs and guns into Ireland and was worth €1 billion. His role last night was made clear by Frank Warren, who confirmed talks have been taking place between Kinahan and Eddie Hearn. So the ball is rolling firmly in the UK, and if you say it's only a matter of time before he shows up at press conferences, it's only a matter of time before people are like, who's he?
Yeah. The Irish Daily Mail for you this morning. Michael Clifford has an exclusive here that features in some of the other papers as well on the return of inter-county football. Round 6, he says, of the Football League has been provisionally fixed to restart the inter-county season with a specific date of October the 17th. So it only leaves a small number of final round games to be run off after that. No date has yet been set for anything beyond those round 6 games, but the proposition of an actual date now, it is some way away. But October the 17th to close out the inter-county game, and I presume use those as a sample for what might follow with some sort of a condensed championship perhaps before the year is out, but no mention of that just yet. It is included in that Michael Clifford story, a line from the CPA's Michael Browdy, who wants inter-county teams who return to training against the GAA roadmap to be thrown out of the championship on. In a move that'll never be seen. It's not a very GAA thing to do. There'll be a rap across the knuckles. There'll be a listen, must do better next time sort of thing. But I can't see like Michael Brody now has his gander up, obviously, given that the clubs are in such a position of strength, and is trying to force that home there. Also a lovely shot of full parts in Belgrade Stadium. No restrictions on the numbers of fans that are allowed in. It seems like Serbia must be in a pretty good position. Not overly familiar with their coronavirus rates, but the fact that they're jam-packing the parts in Belgrade Stadium suggests that everything's A-OK over there.
That's it.
Time.
I'm officially off the Dynamo Minsk bandwagon. I am now a Partizan Belgrade fan.
And Rory raring to go for a restart in Texas.
The Irish Daily Star this morning, as you can imagine, with a load of Daniel Kinahan coverage. The front page, crime lord of the ring. Feud victim's dad, Kinahan, should be shunned. Fury as Tyson praises mob boss. Shameful day for pro boxing. And comment on the inside as well. We will not cover these fights. As you heard there on the front page, feud victim's dad, Kinahan, should be shunned. They've got a series of pieces inside, just one of them by Paul Healy, an exclusive. The father of feud victim Michael Barr has said mob boss Daniel Kinahan should be shunned in world boxing following unprecedented praise from Tyson Fury. He will bring boxing to its knees, says his father. The conference in Bahrain should be boycotted by the press and starve him of the publicity he craves. Michael Barr, the manager of the Sunset House in Dublin's North Inner City, was shot 7 times by a masked gunman at the pub on April 24th, 2016. He was murdered after the cartel wrongly believed he was involved in the Regency Hotel murder of their associate, David Byrne. You've also got things like fresh anti-Kinahan graffiti being sprayed onto the gates of the embassy of the UAE in Dublin. The graffiti states that Dubai staff are in danger and also states, get cancer, Daniel Kinahan out of Dubai. So plenty of coverage in the Irish Daily Star news section this morning. The back of the Irish Daily Star then in the sports section leads with Mersey treat. Goodison Derby gets go-ahead. Rory is in call for tolerance meanwhile. He says, growing up amid the troubles in the north gave him a good understanding of the global unrest following the slaying of George Floyd. Kinahan links sparks Fury meanwhile as their coverage continues here. Boxing fans were stunned yesterday as Tyson Fury thanked Dublin gang boss Daniel Kinahan for getting his showdown with Joshua over the line, and negative League of Ireland hope for positive outcome as players yet to test positive for COVID-19 in our own league.
The Irish Sun View this morning also touching on the front page here. First of all, it's a Dan deal, it says across the front page. Fury shout out from mob bosses, Joshua megabouts are agreed. And then on the back page, Wally Downs Jr. writes on the same topic. There you can see all of that. And Owen Cowser has League of Ireland exclusive. Clubs will today be presented with a financial proposal to get back to action. An offer to help offset losses, it seems, from obviously games being held behind closed doors and the lack of revenue that comes in there, and also the possibility or the promise of some new money as well. So, but no details exactly as yet as to where that new money is coming from. But it does seem as if the 19 clubs are going to have some sort of a vote, and certainly more details shared on it a little bit later today. And Gordon Manning also has that exclusive that appears in the Daily Mail, that round 6 of the league is being actively positioned as the return for intercounty football in October.
The Mirror is next up for me. Prem's £1 billion virus hit. Financial experts reveal the cost of pandemic to football. Fury says, I'll finish AJ and Hearn. Tyson Fury, as you can imagine from the headline there, saying he'll finish off Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing by beating Anthony Joshua. Mersey fans vow to steer clear of game, writes David Maddock. Liverpool and Everton fans insist the authorities won't regret allowing the Merseyside derby to be staged at Goodison Park. Alan's late call-up for Italia 90, and FAI wait to hear on cash. Clubs will get 5 days to mull over the FAI's return to play financial package. So that is the latest from the Irish Daily Mirror this morning.
The Telegraph, this will be the biggest British fight in history, writes Gareth A. Davies here. Fight maker Daniel Kinahan referred to in this article as a sometimes controversial character, it says here. It's worth mentioning that Daniel Kinahan is not mentioned at all in the Guardian piece, and also referred to as a controversial figure in the Times London, the London Times today. So that's just give you a bit of a sense as to how the UK media are reporting in this story. And it is obviously one of the biggest shames of this entire thing is that we should all be licking our lips this morning at the prospect of what will be a fascinating bout. How much we can actually engage in that in a sporting sense now obviously remains to be seen, given the connections involved and given the fact that the fight is taking place in a regime like Saudi Arabia that is obviously hosting the fight there for very deliberate reasons. So there is obviously a sense of disappointment and all that, but I'm sure there'll be much more on both of those sides of the story over the coming weeks and months. An incredible story across the top of the Telegraph. Just flash it up there again. Alarming lack of black leaders in sport, writes Ben Rumsby here, and the statistic that just 3% of positions, 3% on national governing boards in the UK are occupied by black people. It's absolutely incredible, and I would say that you would have to assume that we're the very same here, so it's certainly not a case of pointing fingers over the water. But certainly holding this up, it says of the 11 board members on the FA board, none are black. Same for the RFU, same for the England and Wales Cricket Board, tennis, swimming, and incredibly UK Sport, the board of UK Sport, with no black members whatsoever. And as I said, I'm sure that if we were to dig into these statistics on this side of the water, they'd be much the same.
The Guardian this morning leads with devastating drop. Premier League clubs face £500 million loss, warns Delight. Premiership players moving towards strike over wage cuts. Meanwhile, this is England's leading club rugby players. They're considering strike action in an increasingly bitter row over the imposition of permanent wage cuts. They're looking to bring the salary cap down in the Premiership. Many clubs already imposing temporary salary reductions of 25%, prompted by the lockdown. And Kevin Mitchell on the potential blockbuster, The Best of British, Joshua versus Fury, moves a step closer as parties agree 2-fight deal. And as Adrian has mentioned, there's no mention of Mr. Kinahan in that particular article.
The Racing Post prize money row erupts as Tracks accused of anti-competitive practice here, writes Bill Barber, divisions essentially over prize money as raised by the Horsemen's Group. That's the Racing Post.
Just before we get on to the app then, just the front page of the Herald this morning is "Don't let evil Kinahan win. Crime boss Daniel Kinahan must not win his fight for credibility," a TD has warned. So this is Neil Richmond, who's been on the record slamming the move, saying evil Daniel Kinahan cannot be allowed run for cover. And in the back of the Herald, there's all options on the table. Brennan urges the GEA to look beyond usual venue boundaries. I think, Adrian, you've already mentioned that story with Nicky Brennan. The OTB Sports app, meanwhile, it's your one-stop shop for all things off the ball, from breaking news to our live shows, videos, and our 40 hours plus of podcasts every single week. It'll also be the exclusive home of live Premier League commentary when play resumes next week. And we'll talk a little bit more about that with Stephen Doyle in a little while. So it's brand new, it's out now, it's on the Play Store, it's on the App Store, depending on your phone. It is slick and it is available right now. Right, when will gyms be back and what will they look like? Up next, we're going to be chatting in with former Footballer of the Year and gym owner, Mayo's Andy Moran.
OTB AM.
Okay, so we are turning our attention to gyms here in Ireland because they're still closed and they're still going to be closed for another little while. We've got gym owner and former Mayo footballer Andy Moran with us on the line. Andy, how are you getting on?
All's good. The whole former Mayo footballer still takes a while to get used to, but it's we're good, and we're not back, but we're back in getting the place ready. So I think this is the first Zoom call I've done from actually the office, which is good. Back over in Castlebar, so definitely moving in the right direction, Eoin. And with the sport and gyms and everything coming back, at least we're getting back to some sort of normality.
For sure. Do you know when you will be back?
The $1 million question. So we got good news last week. If I'm being honest, we were originally set for phase 5, which was August 10th, and we definitely got pushed forward one phase, but now we're hoping that maybe we're pushed forward another phase into phase 3, which is the end of this month. And the way things are looking, I know the Taoiseach had another bit of a speech this morning where he stated that we could have all business nearly back before the start of July, which would be great for us. And it's we would look at ourselves as playing a huge role within the communities of Castlebar and Claremorris in terms of giving people an outlet, particularly the younger people of the communities, getting them involved in some sort of activity and exercise, which plays a huge role in the mental health and, I suppose, society in general, really.
Absolutely. So you're looking at best case scenario June 29th, worst case scenario July 20th.
Yes, which is great because that's already 3 weeks further. So we had we have 3 gyms. We have 2 kind of class-based gyms, one in Claremorris, one in Castlebar, and then we're part of a big commercial unit, which is a swimming pool stroke gym area here in the new leisure complex in Castlebar. So bear with me now for a second when I just explain it to you. The swimming pool was supposed to be involved in phase 4, and the gym was supposed to be involved in phase 5. Right. So if the gym moved up, we're still wondering, as the pool moved up to phase 3, and we're still we've got a good body in Active Ireland who look after us, and we're just waiting for confirmation really of where we're going to sit. I know Fáilte Ireland and different kind of entities have been making recommendations towards pools in hotels and gyms and hotels. So do we fall in line with them? We're not quite sure just yet, but definitely positive news last Friday, and definitely is good for us and our staff.
How have you been rejigging equipment or setting the place out in terms of being able to operate under social distancing guidelines?
Yeah, so with the pool, for instance, here, like Swim Ireland and the body that's over the UK swimming, they compete against each other and they kind of work together. So you might have seen that some of the top athletes have been back training this week around Ireland, particularly the swimmers. So they're still toying with the idea of what's going to be used within the pool, but within the gyms. The gyms are going to be, we set out our commercial gym here where we're lucky to have 3 or 4 rooms that we used to use as physio rooms. And now we've put a bit equipment in that. So just say myself, my wife Jennifer came in and we were using it. We can use that room for like people who live together or roommates or whatever. They can come in and use that room as they wish, and they can book that room. And then within the gym itself, then we've all equipment lined out in a 2 meter zone. And we've one direction, so everyone is going to be moving in kind of in a pattern and coming out the middle of so it's going to be a one-way system essentially. So you go right to cardio, you go left to strength, and you come out the middle, and then away you go. So it's going to be work like that. And then in the class-based gyms, not to bore the listeners, but in the class-based gyms, it's really, really easier because we've got a decent bit of space. We're going to have a 16 square meter area. So if me and you were doing a session, you'd go into zone 1 I'd go into zone 2, and you literally will not move out of that zone for the whole length of time. But we're designating a 16 square meter area. We used to be able to fit up to 50, maybe even a tiny bit more into our classes. Now we're going to be going at 16, and we're just going to run more classes throughout the day.
Well, that's very doable, isn't it? Like it's not like a game of football where you're wondering how much they're encroaching on other players. If you're in a gym class, you tend to keep to yourself, and almost the pod scenario already exists in a gym setup.
And it really works well, because if I've an assault bike or a row machine or a Versa climber in one part of the zone, I can have the Versa climber in the other part of the zone as well. So they're always moving around at the same time. So you're never close. Where in a commercial gym, it's that more difficult because you need to walk to the next bit of equipment and there's a bit of movement in it. So it takes a bit more thinking in the commercial gym. But the fact that we had so much space, particularly in Castlebar, we can give this 16 square metre and we can get people in that zone. Of course, there's going to be bigger gaps between classes because we're going to have to clean all the equipment but essentially it works, and we're looking forward to opening.
In terms of, say, using a treadmill, will it be up to the customer to wipe down a treadmill with, I don't know, disinfectant more than just, I know the quorum is always to wipe it down anyway with a towel. Is there going to be perspex besides treadmills? I think we've seen that in Asia over the last couple of months. How are you viewing those sort of things in terms of extra measures? This
is the funny thing about it. This literally is changing every 24 hours. So you'd be recommending, my cart is full of stuff to purchase, but I'm afraid to press the button because we're just going to wait. We're sitting and waiting. We've the stuff lined up. We've it ready. We know where we're going to put it. The perspex and all the little signage and everything. Like, I know businesses now that have bought 2 meters everything. And it could go to 1 meter tomorrow. And all of a sudden, that's a massive cost on a business. So the advantage for us to have been in phase 5 and phase 4, even though we want to work, the advantage is that Europe now are playing with these ideas and they're getting them through. And now we can just copy that model. So how it's going to work out, I don't know. In terms of the sanitising, the huge responsibility going to be on the customer to before and after use to wipe down equipment and clean it off when you're finished. And we will also have an extra member of staff on the floor to make sure of that as well. So the key thing here is that we can get trust within each other to use it, and then trust for the next people. Like, there's a huge controversy about towels. Should you be allowing people to bring their own towel into a gym? Little bits and pieces like that. So all that kind of needs to be ironed out as well before we start back.
And what about changing rooms?
Yeah, we're lucky in the leisure centre here that we have pods down at the swimming pool.
Okay.
So we can close off every second pod and we can use it that way. The big group changing rooms, it's hard to know. Like, I think if you're coming to the gym, you're probably going to be coming dressed and going home dressed, like what we used to do when we were playing under 12 ones, you know?
Yeah, except for the lack of a container out the back, it'll probably be in your car or getting changed at home.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Them famous containers.
In terms of, say then, just a regular gym workout, if you're doing your own thing, will you have to book a session in your gym, for example?
Yeah,
even just
I think at the start we're going to probably, all us in the industry are going to have to go tight and then move it out. The one thing we don't want to do is try to let people free rein and then start restricting them. We'll probably start with the restrictions, and then as we get to know more about COVID-19 and what we need to be cleaning and what we need to be doing within the gym, then we can ease off the restrictions a tiny bit. But I think if we bring people in and try to teach them new ways, I think that's going to be good. And I think there's a lot of benefits to this in terms of gym. Like, you went to the gyms yourself and you've seen 5 young fellas gathered around a bench press machine, a bench press. Like, it's not very safe. So we're trying to move them all the time. Now they've no choice. It's only really one person to each bit of equipment. So it's going to free up a lot of our staff in that way as well,
Absolutely. Was there any point over the last couple of months, Andy, where you were a little bit worried about the sector, where you were worried about your own business? It sounds very positive here today that you've got it all mapped out and you're basically just waiting for the green light now.
Yeah, our business, we're every one of us all throughout the country. We're lucky in the west of Ireland because our rents aren't that high. Our rates are not that high. If you're in Dublin and you have the rents and rates that they have and they need to make a business, that's very, very difficult. You add to it, the COVID payment for businesses has been good, but the problem our industry have is that we've memberships on hold. So basically we open at the end of this month. You've July, August, September, October potentially, where you can't bring in any income. So the difficulty for us is going to be when we open. And that's where we really need, I'm not making a rallying call, it sounds like it, to be honest with you, but that's where we need support. And that's where the worrying times is going to come for us. It's not now, it's actually when we open and our costs start coming in. There's no more COVID payments. There's none of this. And then all of a sudden, we are not going to be able to make any turnover because we need to honour every membership that's already there.
Is it a situation where the government need to pay special attention to this sector and perhaps look at another way of financial help that you might need? Like, the other way obviously is new customers, but it's possibly hard to see if there will be a spike in new customers after this.
I think there's going to be demand. I honestly think there is now, but you know me, at this stage I'm the eternal optimist, but like, new customers aren't going to be possible for the first while because we're going to have to keep the numbers. We're going to, like, as I said to you, at one stage we could have 50 more in 2 classes in our gym. Now that's down to 16 for the same hour. And we have, whatever amount of members we have in our book, and we were like it was going quite well at the time, but some of our classes were really busy. So we need to honour them memberships before we start taking in more memberships. So that's going to be the difficulty. So yes, we could bring in more, but we won't be able to feasibly honour, make sure they have a space in the class. So it's about getting them memberships, keeping ourselves afloat, and once we get that 3-4 months over, I think then we'll start moving again. But for them 3 or 4 months up to 6 months, the sector definitely needs a tiny bit of help.
Right. So you think just a special bit of looking after from the government for, what is it, 3 months you say? So if you open for the start of July, you think maybe up until October, if there was a 3-month, not a COVID payment, but something along those lines for staff members and for the entire sector, that should keep most gyms afloat for the time being. Yeah, and I think
it'll keep most businesses afloat. And like and I know this sounds corny and it sounds, I suppose, very American if you're saying it, but we do play a huge part in the industry, in the community. Like, our gyms are there, and people who are not involved in sport, not involved in clubs, come into us for their activity. And like, you see the gyms all throughout the country. There's gyms all throughout Mayo and Claremorris and Castlebar and Ballina and Westport doing great jobs for the community. And what that's helping, it's helping the fitness and the obesity and all that sort of thing, but it's also helping the mental health of the populations as well. And I genuinely feel, even during this coronavirus COVID-19 shutdown, gyms have played a huge part in, I suppose, keeping communities together too. So I think that needs to be recognised and it needs to be kind of pointed out as well.
We spoke to you at the start of lockdown about getting Zoom classes underway for the 3 months that it's ended up being. How did they go?
We're on day 86 today.
Right.
We put a class together. It was funny the way it worked. So we did a class every morning, free of charge, onto our social media channels. And it went really well, really popular. But what we found after a while, we kept 16 people on the books, 16 employees on the books, and we actually just went with our timetable. So we have a class live at 6:45, 9:30, 1:15, 5:15, right throughout the day. And we found it a really big benefit to our staff in terms of their structure of their day, their own mental health, how motivated they were to do work. They were back doing the work. Now, it was only maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours during the day, but it really helped them, and it kind of built a structure. So we've kept that going. One, obviously, for the customer, but secondly, for ourselves in terms of our staff. It's really kind of kept us in the mood and kept us going throughout the weeks as well. But I think Zoom is going to be here to stay. So if we're looking at our classes, we're going to have a class in the morning at 6:45, and our normal class for 6:45 in the morning at 9:30. We'll probably have a Zoom class then at 8 o'clock in the morning too, because we have to respect that some people aren't going to be comfortable coming back into the setting. So we're going to provide that service as well when we go back at set.
Yeah, it really seems like a sustainable thing, that there will be a huge appetite for people to get in and use gym equipment again soon, but there will also be an appetite for people to actually make do with what they have now discovered is actually enough to get fit in their own home.
I think that the major reaction we've had is people with young kids, and they literally didn't want 20 minutes, half an hour to themselves. The amount of people we have doing the classes with the kids beside them, kind of working out that way, It's been like, that's been an eye-opener for us in terms of businesses who we go in and we kind of help them in terms of the corporate structure. You can do that through Zoom now as well, and do bodyweight classes as well. Now, I would say an awful lot of our product is social, and it's bringing people together. So there is that element to it as well, where I do think people will be mad to get back and get involved. Basically, it's their football team, it's their soccer team, their 5:15 class on a Monday evening. That's when they meet the people, talk about the weekend, see where we're going. And I think that's going to be an element as well with the Zoom on top of it.
One of the really interesting kind of subplots to all of this, Andy, has been the exercise boom. And like, as you mentioned yourself there, you've noticed it in your Zoom classes, but we've noticed it in actual legitimate figures over the last couple of weeks as well, that adults are exercising now more than at any other point in recent history in Ireland. As somebody involved in the fitness industry, that must give you great hope that you can adapt and return to a level of success that you had pre-COVID-19, and potentially go to an even higher level if you manage to tap into this thirst for fitness now in the country.
I think it's been the biggest positive for me. You go around my small town, Balladreen, and you see people, like, you know yourself, small town, you know everyone, and you see people who you never thought you'd see out walking and cycling and running. I've seen people that are running that I've never dreamt that I'd see them running. You know, they'd be slagging me for running, and now all of a sudden they're running themselves. And I have 2 young kids at home, and like, it's lovely to get out for that half an hour. But I think people now are really realising the benefits of exercise. Like, and I know that sounds silly, but we were brought up in a society, I think, where farming was the key, manual labour was the key. So we were getting a form of exercise. So then when you went running, people kind of looked at you, and so, but we're not there anymore. We're sedentary. The two of us were sitting down here, we're talking on a Zoom call. But now people are seeing, okay, I get out, do something. You can feel good after, where before it could have been doing a job and coming back in doing it. Now you can see, get out, get a sweat on, release the positive kind of energy out of your body, and then you feel a bit of achievement out of it. And if anything positive comes out of this, I think that's the main thing. We've got a crisis here where I suppose our kids haven't been educated in the importance of exercise, because the only thing we're important at doing is we're told to go training, play the football team, then you're encouraged to win and lose, and then you either stick at it at 16 or 17, and you're thinking what's happening. But now all of a sudden you can see why exercise is important. Not team sport, nothing going running, cycling, walking, why the importance of it and where it is. And hopefully parents now can educate their young kids moving forward, and then it'll go through another generation then after that.
That's the key point. Sport isn't just about getting to a place where the end product is winning or losing. It is about getting to a place where you can actually look after yourself a lot more, feel the benefits, feel happier, feel healthier. And as an extension of that, Andy, I wonder if you've noticed even just kind of a deeper understanding that people have about their own mental health. And I certainly noticed myself in WhatsApp groups, people are kind of more willing to chat about how they feel, because all of a sudden they've got this new thing. They're going out for a run, they're going out for a jog, and they're feeling the endorphin rush, and they're realizing, right, this is actually a thing that I can control in my own head. Like, I'm sure you chat to a few of the lads that you play football with, and even lads you don't play football with, but it certainly seemed to me that our awareness of mental health in this country has certainly improved over the last 3 months.
Yeah, so we've got a group of guys. Actually, Barry Solon is one of them that's over in Arsenal, and his brother and a guy called John Gideon. We all meet. Tonight is their night. Actually, we meet up for an hour on Zoom, and we have a bit of fun about. In the first couple of weeks, we genuinely thought we weren't friends. You know, we had nothing to talk about. There was no Gaelic football on, so we'd nothing to give out about. We'd nothing kind of to talk about going on to the following week. No match. But as the weeks went on, I totally agree with you. The conversation has shifted in terms of how you keep and how you feel, and actually listening to how they're feeling, not just mad to talk about Lee Keegan or Con O'Callaghan or any of these guys. We're actually literally talking about politics and feelings and all the emotions that goes on with it. And that's similar to yourself. I've noticed a huge change in myself in terms of what's important to me, being at home with my kids. I retired from football last October, and work kind of ran away from me, if I'm being honest. I was probably trying to block it out, and I don't really miss playing football. I'm not saying I do, but I was definitely looking for another avenue of something. And all of a sudden this comes, it stops, and for the first 4 or 6 weeks was quite tough. But now over the last couple of weeks, really enjoying being at home, really enjoying having time to myself, really enjoying listening to people instead of just talking all the time. And I think it's been a huge change. And as you said, the society as a whole, and asking people how we are and things like that, it's been huge. And during the COVID, we the football community of Mayo had a tragedy here in Mayo, and it really opened it up. Then saying, I seen lads that I never expected putting on the WhatsApp saying, lads, if you need to talk to someone, make sure you pick up the phone. And you're just like, so positives do come out of all negatives if you can kind of look at them that way. And it's sad that things happen, but then if we can grow and learn from it, I think it's huge.
Sure. It seems that we're just better equipped all of a sudden to deal with these sort of things. That it's amazing that it's the conversation that you have that almost allow you to vocalize the things that you've been thinking anyway. And there's almost an element of self-learning in that as well. I'm not sure if that's what you found.
Yeah, if you take an example, so if you take Ian, a sporting example, you've kept a show going now for what, and all your rivals and so you've kept a show going for 13 weeks without any sport. If someone said that to you 6 months ago that you had to do that, you'd be looking at them thinking you're mad, But you've done it, and now all of a sudden it's returning. So it's finding new ways, finding new topics, learning something about yourself, and I think that just allows you to develop a tiny bit.
Well, we will be talking about Lee Keegan and Con O'Callaghan before long. Hopefully these two things can coexist though, Andy. That will be a great world where we can have our football and we can also look after ourselves and keep ourselves in a healthy place above the shoulders as well. Listen, congratulations on surviving this, and the future is looking bright. It's great to hear so much positivity about the sector and positivity in general. Andy Moran, a pleasure.
Thanks so much. Talk to you soon, lads.
Andy Moran there on the line, caught up with him before we came on air this morning. Adrian, there's plenty of positivity there to take from that, the idea that gyms are going to be back up and running, but also just the general tone. You can't listen to Andy Moran and not have a bit of a pep in your step afterwards.
I'm buzzing for the gym zone, you know that. I can't wait to get in and get my slot booked up and make sure that, listen, he is one of life's interesting people, isn't he? He employs 16 people, by the way. He's 3 or 4 gyms he has. I knew that he'd obviously we're very familiar with the fact that Andy Moran has a gym and has been running his own business for the last couple of years, but that is a significant SME. Fair play to him, and he obviously is just a very thoughtful, interesting guy who thinks outside of his. He's also thinking obviously outside of his own 4 walls. So yeah, good stuff.
Do you think people will be driven back to gyms more than ever after this? Because I'm kind of caught between two stools here a little bit, that everybody is more aware of how important exercise is to every other facet of their life, but also by the same token people have been taken to the pavements or doing workouts in their own house, and perhaps they look at a gym as an unnecessary place. I wonder what's going to be the net gain out of all of this for a gym owner. Obviously Andy is very positive about his potential prospects.
Yeah, I can't see that it is outside the other side of this, that it is necessarily going to be something that drives people back to the gyms. I think you're right to say that actually there might be an element of it that we've all realised that, how many of these, PE with Joe that I'm sure you've been doing every morning on after AM, that you can use your water bottles at home, or you can use various counterweights that are readily available around you, or it might be an interesting offshoot that a lot of, I've seen some of Andy's people that work at his gyms doing some of the, I've watched some of the short segments of those sessions, and it is highly possible to do all this stuff at home. So I just wonder if there isn't something like almost, I understand why they're doing it. I think it's very good and very positive, and obviously people are engaging with it. I just wonder if some of it is a bit counterintuitive in that, like, you don't need to go to your gym. You can do all this, set yourself up at home, and you'll be fine.
Well, it's a conversation we're going to have over the next little while, and hopefully...
Are you saying you're getting back to gym zone? Is this because this is about the third time you asked me this morning? I'm assuming that there must be some... you must be getting back yourself, are you?
No, just getting your take. You've been kind of wishy-washy on it, so finally, at long last, I pinned you down to your opinion on it. Stephen Doyle, good morning. Oh, we don't appear to... Steve, are you there? No, just having a bit of an issue.
Steve's doing PE with Joe himself there. He seems to cut off that. Shut down Joe Wick, Steve-O. Come on. That's it.
What we're going to chat about, Stephen Doyle, is our best case, worst case scenario when it comes to the Premier League's return. We're also going to chat a little bit about football in general and broadcasting in general as football is coming back. Steve-O, of course, will be one of OTB's main commentators, as we've got loads and loads of live Premier League commentary coming your way on OTB over the next few months. Adrian, I want to get your take on this. Are you pro or against the idea of fake crowd noises in general at this point?
Well, I don't want to be wishy-washy on our own, so I'm going to
give me an answer.
Give you an opinion on this one. I'm all for it. I'm all for it in that. So there have been games, and I haven't seen any of them yet, but there have been games that have had crowd noises streamed into them. And I saw Gary Lineker tweeting about it the other week, and I'm all for it to begin with, right? I'm all for anything that can enhance the sterile atmosphere of a ground with no fans in it. So, like let's have a look at it. Even if it is the blow-up dolls that were at the Japanese baseball, whatever it was, we didn't know that's what they were, was the excuse that came out afterwards. I'm all for whatever it is that we think might take the edge off a sterile atmosphere. Like, let's have a look at it. Like, you're going to end up with... Some clubs are going to get it absolutely spot on. Some clubs are going to make a hames of it. You're not going to get the jeering when the referee makes a bad decision. They're not going to suddenly make an editorial call that they need to give the referee some crap. Or, an opponent, the pantomime villain, you're not going to see any of that stuff. So don't expect any of that. Just expect and hope that whatever they can do to feed in a little bit of noise around goals or whatever. Like, what are the moments that... Have you seen any of them with crowd noise?
I have, and it works. It works a treat. I've seen, I see a couple of the US stations were doing Bundesliga with crowd noises. The South Korean football were doing crowd noises, and then BT did crowd noises for the Bundesliga at the weekend, and it works. Stephen Doyle, you're there now. How are things?
I am, Owen. How's it going? Good, thanks.
Very well. You must be... I was going to say you must be absolutely buzzing for the return of the Premier League, but I'm looking over your left shoulder. You're buzzing for tonight, 9 o'clock, Betis versus Sevilla. Although that's an athletic scarf beside it, is it? What's your affinity to Betis there?
Absolutely none whatsoever. No, I went to the reverse fixture back in November. My God, it feels like 5 years ago now. But I went to the Betis, obviously, were the home team back in November. But what an atmosphere, what a game. I would highly recommend to anybody, if you're going to go see a game of football in Spain, go to see the Seville derby if you can. It's a brilliant match. And I got to see Joaquin playing for Betis. Betis were actually beaten 2-1 on the night. Luke de Jong got the winner, former Newcastle and PSV striker. But I got to see Joaquin in the flesh, 38 years of age. And he still looks absolutely brilliant. He's a fantastic player. So, yeah, it's a great tie. The Bilbao scarf, I was at the so-called friendly derby as well a few years back against Sociedad, which is another one I would recommend. But it's going to be great. But even better, the Premier League is coming back, and we're going to have Premier League football off the ball.
Well, before we get into that, let's have a look at some of the footage from that Sevilla Betis match. Well, that is incredible. This is before kick-off, Steve, obviously.
It was, yeah, absolutely. Like, it's just they actually paid. It was a huge figure. I can't remember what the sum of money was, but for that the big tifo at the start. And I tell you one thing, Sociedad Bilbao, as I said, it was called a friendly derby. You'll see all the fans mixing before the game. in the bars there beforehand, but Betis and Sevilla, they really hate each other. I suppose Betis will be the more kind of blue-collar working class club, whereas Sevilla will be regarded as the very bourgeoisie club of the city, and they do not like each other one bit. And there was a fair bit of abuse being thrown up into the little corner of the stadium where the Sevilla fans were, which of course I joined in with. You know, being Betis loyal and through and through, as I have been for many years.
You do look at those clips and you're like, God, it's going to be quite an absence not having crowds at games, and especially derbies and a big game like tonight. You're going to miss it quite a bit. What's your view on crowd noise and artificial crowd noise from a television spectacle, at least?
Yeah, I suppose it took me a while to get used to it. I was watching Borussia Dortmund versus Hertha Berlin there at the weekend, and you know, I think I'd grown accustomed to having no crowd and no noise there, and it was quite interesting listening to the players, I think, and the coaches shouting at each other. That might be more interesting, I suppose, when it comes to the Premier League. We can actually understand what they're saying. But I don't know. It took me a while to kind of get used to then, because you can still, even though you've got the crowd noise there, you can still hear the echo of the stadium. You can still hear that echo of the players' voices going around the stadium. So you can tell it's artificial, but it's not the worst. I think maybe for radio, if it is used for radio, it might be a little bit more. It might be a bit more useful, you know, because I think it will be. It's different on radio if you've got a dead noise there, whereas TV, you can probably get away with not having a crowd there.
Yeah, it's a good point. Let's get into our Premier League preview then. We're continuing with our A to Z of best case, worst case scenario. We've got Liverpool, we've got Manchester City, and we've got Manchester United today. Steve-O, you've come on a pretty good day. Liverpool is where we're going to start. Best case scenario, like, I mean, it's the Premier League is in the back pocket, so the best case scenario here is what they might do off the pitch. But is it also involving how they win this and how they finish the league?
Yeah, absolutely. When you say it's a good day, I don't know, because Liverpool, Manchester United, Man City, of course, I'm going to get all the abuse from the biggest three of the biggest clubs in the Premier League. Quite notable that Nathan decided to Skype off day. Anyway, you're right, though. Liverpool definitely. I think Jurgen Klopp has already set out his target before the season has resumed. He wants his team to go out there and win the last 9 matches. 27 points on offer. They're on 82. They could get up to 109. Obviously, the record is there, 100 Manchester City from 2 seasons ago, and I think they really want to beat that. The only thing is, we've seen from Liverpool before the break in the season was that they had lost 3 of their previous 5 matches, beaten by Atletico Madrid in the Champions League, beaten by Watford in the Premier League, and beaten by Chelsea in the FA Cup. They were stuttering a little bit. I know they beat Bournemouth 2-1 before the season broke, but they always beat Bournemouth. Bournemouth are always terrible against Liverpool, so that's always a gimme. So I think there will be question marks over Liverpool and their form going into this season. I think they need to approach the last few games of the season like Bayern Munich have done in Germany. Of course, they've won 6 out of 6. They hit the ground running and they're absolutely annihilating every single team that they play before them. And I think that's the kind of way that Klopp will want his team to go out there and play, as they do Liverpool when they're at their best. A lot of pace, hit teams really hard, keep them under pressure. And, you know, when you look at their opening few fixtures there, they got Everton away, Crystal Palace at home. You'd expect them to beat those teams. But as we've seen in the Bundesliga as well, home wins aren't easy to get. No. I think it was just calculated 46 matches we've had so far in the Bundesliga. There's been 10 home wins out of 46 games and 22 away wins. That's nearly half of the matches have been won by the away team. So Crystal Palace going to Anfield, you know, with no supporters there, no cop, that's a game that Crystal Palace always score against Liverpool. So I wouldn't say it's guaranteed that they're going to win that title in the first couple of games. They then have Manchester City, of course, before facing Aston Villa. You would imagine that would be the latest that they get the job done against Aston Villa. And then it's all about seeing how many points can they win. They've no distraction from the FA Cup, no distraction from the Champions League now. It's all about winning that title. And I think they should do, and I think they should beat that 100 points record set by Manchester City.
I hear what you're saying about the form before the break, Steve-O, but I think it's kind of pointless, isn't it? The form dipped as a result of an incredibly taxing few years on this team. Like, from a World Cup. You had an African Cup of Nations thrown in there as well to two of their key attackers, obviously. You've had a Club World Cup. You've had going all the way in the Champions League last season. Currently involved in every competition, basically, bar the FA Cup, right until the day when lockdown was announced. If football had continued till the end of the season, players would have been brought into the Euros, they would have been brought into a summer tour. This has given them the enforced break that these players, high on pace, a hugely high octane way of playing, needs. I can't see this going any way but in a positive way for Liverpool. This potentially is a team that will benefit most from the break that we've had.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility, and you have to factor in as well that Jordan Henderson was injured for a good chunk of those games just before the break. And as we all know, he's such a key player for them, and he's been playing really well this season. I think as well, Mo Salah had just hit a bit of form. I think he scored 5 in his previous six Premier League matches before they returned here. So he was finding a bit of form. I think Firmino was a little bit off, wasn't he? I think he'd gone 8 or 9 games without a goal before that match against Atletico Madrid, which didn't really do them any use at the end. But yeah, look, I suppose it's a fair argument to make. They've been on the go for a long time. I'd also be interested to see whether we could have, last year, I remember the Champions League final was a bit of a damp squib really between themselves and Tottenham. And I kind of made the point at the time that because players they get themselves up to a certain point of fitness and that, then all of a sudden they've got 3 weeks off and the body kind of seizes up. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of condition the players are like when they come back. But just from what Jurgen Klopp has been saying while they've been off, and he's kind of setting them these targets pretty publicly, I think he's got this team really sharp, and I think he's going to expect them to go out there and play as well as we've seen Liverpool playing this season.
For sure.
There's also a case, isn't there, that Liverpool are going to wrap this. It's not a case of are they going to wrap it up. They are going to do that. And so it's just a case of sort of how long it takes them to do that. At which point they can obviously start to rest some of their players if they wish at least for the rest of the Premier League season, and give them a bit of a break before the next season kicks off. There's a strong argument that Liverpool, before the next season even begins, are in a far better position than any of the competitors.
Yeah,
definitely. I think the plan is to give players the official holiday in September, because it looks like the Champions League are going to run off that competition as a kind of a straight knockout, possibly in one city in August. So then that would mean they're going to wait till all the domestic seasons are finished before getting that underway, and then it looks like the players will get off. But as you say, Adrian, if those Liverpool players get that title wrapped up, give them maybe a couple of games off towards the end of the season, bring in a couple of the younger players, get them a bit of experience before next season, and as you say, an extended break for those players like Sadio. And it's interesting as well, if you look at the Liverpool squad, I know Gini Wijnaldum is in contract talks at the moment. He's going to hit 30 this year. Jordan Henderson's hitting 30 this month. There's a few that Liverpool squad are kind of hitting a certain age, and there's a bit of a gap there as well. Like, looking ahead to next season for Liverpool, we've seen them bring in a couple of the younger players in the FA Cup, but these guys are 18, 19, 20 years of age. Talking about the likes of Brewster, Jones, Williams, Hoover. I think Liverpool, and I know Jurgen Klopp was talking about it would be, bringing in signings at a time when they're looking for salary waivers might be the best thing to do. But I think they need to bring in 1 or 2 players in the close season as well, just for a little bit of experience. And looking,
Are you concerned, Steel, about the fact that they've kind of laid down on Timo Werner, that they've basically admitted that they couldn't go toe-to-toe with Chelsea on that particular purchase? Are you worried if they wanted to make a marquee signing this summer?
I don't know how much of that speculation you can actually believe, even, and I always wonder with transfer speculation, how close are these people actually to the upper echelons of clubs like Liverpool and that kind of thing, and how much do we really know when it comes out there? I call it controversial. I think Timo Werner, I don't think he's the right player for Liverpool, and I know the likes of Robbie Fowler, Steve McManaman, a couple of players, ex-players like that, have come out and saying, Michael Owen, I think it was, weren't sure about Timo Werner. I was talking to Phil Egan, our own Phil Egan, about this a few weeks back, and I think Timo Werner needs a lot of work. Look, I think he would actually be, Jurgen Klopp might actually be the best coach for him, because I think he needs a bit of coaching. I find his touch in the box is a little bit poor. Right. You can let him down his first touch. Listen, if I'm a manager of any team, any club in Europe at the moment, I'd be going all out to get Haaland. Haaland is just pay whatever you need to pay for him. That this guy he's like 19 years of age. He's almost a finished article. Whoever I'm managing, just go out, buy Haaland, that's it.
Werner's 24. Do we see his touch in the box improving to the point where he can take Chelsea to Premier League challenging?
Well, Andy Robertson was probably early mid-20s, I think, wasn't he, when he signed for Liverpool from Hull City, and Jurgen Klopp has turned him into a better player. And there's been a couple of players like that, you know, who are kind of maybe around the early mid-20s. Who have, like you could argue the likes of Wijnaldum, players like that have improved under Klopp. And I remember him when he came in there first, and people were talking about him maybe signing players for big money, and he was saying, he was adamant at that time, I'm going to stick with the players that I have. Joel Matip is maybe another one you could throw in there as well, that he was determined that he was going to coach these players to be better players. It's something that he's quite big on, and definitely I think if they were to sign Werner, he could coach them to be a better player.
Let's move on to Manchester City. What is the best case scenario for them in terms of the end of the season?
Well, win a couple of trophies, isn't it? They can win the FA Cup, they can win the Champions League. I don't know. The Champions League I'm looking at the teams left in that, and I'm thinking Bayern Munich and Atletico Madrid are the two favourites. You look at Bayern Munich now and how good they're playing, and if they can carry that form into this final competition that UEFA eventually put forward, I think Bayern Munich have to be the absolute favourites for it. Oh, Manchester City, like what do you say about them? They've got bad results in them. We've seen it this season against Norwich City, against Wolves. If teams go out there and they're not bullied by them, you know, they can be beaten. They're not invincible as they used to be. And the last game I did actually for Off the Ball was the Manchester derby with Brian Kerr, before this the season was paused. And United really put it up to City. I know City dominated possession, but they were pretty toothless in that match. Sergio Aguero was poor. I know they were missing Kevin De Bruyne. That was obviously a big loss. And Phil Foden came in. They're just, I just wouldn't have a huge amount of confidence in Manchester City to win that Champions League. FA Cup should be a gimme for them. You know, they should be going and win that competition once more. But the prestige of the FA Cup, I know it's been spoken about so many times, but you would worry about Manchester City as well, obviously, with this appeal against the European ban hanging over them. We're not going to know for a few weeks. I would also be wondering what Pep Guardiola is thinking about Kevin De Bruyne, his best player, his leader in the team, and coming out with comments saying that he was looking, you know, he would think about a move if Manchester City are banned from European competition. If one of my players is coming out and saying that he's thinking about leaving the club, I'm not going to be very happy. And I'm wondering, is that going to cause division in the dressing room as well? Because if you're a player at Manchester City and you're listening to comments from the leader in the dressing room and he's talking about possibly leaving next season before the season is finished, I'm going to be a little bit unhappy if I'm a Manchester City player, I think, in that dressing room as well. And you just worry about the club. Is it going to be like a house of cards just falling over if this ban, if they don't win this appeal? You know, Pep Guardiola, how long is he going to stay? He's already had 4 seasons at Manchester City. He left Barcelona after 4 seasons. He left Bayern Munich after 3 seasons. How much more is he going to hang in there? Now, I know he did say he's going to honour his contract, which ends next summer. But you look over at Barcelona and his old pal, the president, Bartomeu, is trying to get the presidency again there at Barcelona. He's already talked about getting Pep back to the Catalan club. It's all kind of, I don't know, the pieces are all coming together for Pep Guardiola to possibly return to the camp now. And maybe this will be the time to do it with Manchester City if they were to get thrown out of Europe. I know they do argue the point that they haven't done anything wrong. But if you lose your manager, your top player, it's looking a bit worrying. I know there's been talk Raheem Sterling possibly moving back to Liverpool or maybe somewhere else, I don't know. But I think it's looking like a delicate situation there for Manchester City if they don't win a trophy and if that ban stays in place.
That's the thing. If they get to a Champions League final this year, that is the only date that could possibly go toe-to-toe with the date that is cast revealing their final decision next month. That is the thing that determines perhaps what happens to Manchester City over the next 2 years. We'll move finally on to Manchester United. Stephen, best case scenario here, like they were pretty good before the break.
They were 11 matches without a loss in all competitions before the break on. They were absolutely fantastic. And just as it happened, actually, myself and Brian had done 3 Manchester United games for Off the Ball before the break. They played Watford, beaten 3-0 at Old Trafford. There was a draw against Everton at Goodison Park, and then the win against City at the Derby. And having been at a couple of matches at Old Trafford over the last couple of seasons, the atmosphere there it hasn't been great, and especially when results were going badly. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, the manager, made the point about it after the City game. He hadn't felt the atmosphere that he felt at Old Trafford that day for a long time, and it really was noticeable. They were playing with a real confidence, you know. There's just obviously Bruno Fernandes coming in January was a massive signing for them. He's been a bit of a coup. His stats are off the chart compared to the rest of the team. His assists, his passes, all that kind of stuff. But I think the key thing as well, Owen, is the centre-half pairing of Lindelof and Harry Maguire. They've been absolutely excellent. I was counting up. I think it's 11 matches. They've conceded 2 goals in those 11 games. 2 goals in 11 matches. That's an excellent record. As well, we've seen they can switch formations because Solskjaer has played that back 3. They can also play a back 4. They can bring Luke Shaw into the back 3 or else play him as a full back. They've got a couple of players coming back as well. Marcus Rashford's back. Paul Pogba is back. Do you play Paul Pogba on? I don't know. I think that could upset the chemistry of the midfield. I think Bruno Fernandes is the player that they've needed in there. He's doing the stuff that they would expect.
Well, Steve, sorry to interrupt. Go for your ideal midfield here. How don't you upset that chemistry?
Well, Fred has been playing brilliant. I think Fred has really settled into Manchester United this season. He's been excellent. I think McTominay is a player I have always loved. I get slagged off by Manchester United fans in the off the ball office about Scott McTominay. I think he's an excellent player. There's no frills. Well, I think he's actually a little bit like Jordan Henderson at Liverpool. I think people are going to see Scott McTominay over the next couple of seasons and respect what he does. He's a battling midfielder. He breaks up the play. He gets other players into the game. I think he's just the player that they need there. So I'd have him, Fred, and maybe Bruno Fernandes playing up a little bit further. And I wouldn't take Daniel James out of that team. I think Daniel James has been fantastic. He gives brilliant cover for Wan-Bissaka. And I would have James, Rashford and Martial probably as that attacking trio in front of that midfield of McTominay, Fred and Bruno Fernandes.
Is it not the ideal time, like, not your love for McTominay notwithstanding, Steve-O, like an opportunity to forget about everything that's gone before with the 3 months that's been off and everything, all is forgiven. Paul Pogba, is he back to fitness? Is he ready to get back into the team?
Yeah, they're saying Rashford and Solskjaer are saying Rashford and Pogba are both fit and ready to play. But considering what he's done this season, and you know, if you were a United player in that team, Adrian, would you be happy at Paul Pogba just coming back in like that after what he's been at?
I think that the club have no choice at some point but to put him back in, because in terms, if they are going to get rid of him, almost more important than ever to put him back in and actually let the rest of the world know that listen, no, everything's here fine. You know, Paul had a bit of a wobble, but his attitude is absolutely, this guy, you want this guy, he's an unbelievable player, because otherwise they're going to have to sell him for half nothing.
I told you, you're right. Like they need to show the other clubs that he is still a player worth putting or investing money in. But what do they want for Paul Pogba? 80, 90, 100 million. They'll want to recoup a large amount, if not all of that fee that they paid from themselves. How many clubs in Europe are going to pay that fee over the next couple of months, over the next year after what's happened? We know clubs are losing money. And is there anybody out there that's going to pay that fee for Paul Pogba?
Man City.
Yeah, possibly themselves or Real Madrid. But you know, they all know he's got an attitude problem, and yeah, it's going to be really hard, I think, for Manchester United to offload Paul Pogba. But the thing for Manchester United is they need to qualify for the Champions League, and if they're going to qualify for the Champions League, they have to have their best team out there. And I think he found the right chemistry with Bruno Fernandes playing with the other two players, and that's the most important thing. They have to get for the Champions League for next season, because if United are left in the Europa League again for another season, they're in big trouble. They've got their debt increased by £127 million. We were told over the break. You know, they've got big financial issues. I know they've got 90 million in the transfer kitty, but they've got big debt problems there, and I think they have to get the Champions League. And if you want to get into the Champions League, you're going to hold off. You have to hold off Wolverhampton Wanderers and Sheffield United, two really good teams. Which is another, I suppose, interesting side story to United starting their season back. They've got Sheffield United in their first couple of games, and it's going to be a cracker of a match, I think, at Old Trafford.
Just the last one, Steve-O, and it's on Pogba as well. You'll correct me if I'm wrong on this, but has Solskjaer really experimented with the three at the back before Pogba's injury? Because obviously it's something that they've done much more to start of this calendar year with a back three. I'm just looking at the City match, back three of Lindelof, Harry Maguire, Luke Shaw, with Brandon Williams as your wing back or your left of the midfield, whatever you want to call it, which is the closest from my memory that Manchester United have been to that Juventus team that Paul Pogba excels in. In certain ways you kind of feel that Paul Pogba's arrived at the wrong time for football, that the game has almost passed him by. And even when France won the World Cup, did we really see the best version of Paul Pogba? We didn't. We saw the best version of Paul Pogba in a Juventus jersey when he had a wing back going outside him, when he had that little bit more protection for him to get the best out of himself. Manchester United are slowly looking like they might be able to play a system akin to Conte's at Juve.
Yeah, do they have the quality in there that, like, Andrea Pirlo playing beside Pogba? Sure. Do they have a player as good as him? Look, and I don't like going down the Graham Souness route of having a go at Paul Pogba, but I really think there's an attitude problem there with him. I think the only problem for Paul Pogba is Paul Pogba himself. The guy really needs to apply himself. And can we go back to maybe The Last Dance, which I know you guys did a great podcast on over the whole series, and you look at the attitude of Michael Jordan and the players that he had around him in that that Chicago Bulls team. I know Solskjaer was talking about the documentary himself, and just the attitude of those players and how dedicated they were and how much they applied themselves out in the court.
Paul Pogba is Scottie Pippen, Steve-O. He's throwing the toys out of the pram. He's like an extended Scottie Pippen. I ain't getting off this bench, boss. I ain't giving a toss what's happening.
But look, I think there's also an argument you could say that Paul Pogba might feel that this Manchester United team, he feels they're at his level now. Maybe he felt that the squad that the team he was playing in before the break were a little bit below him. Maybe he feels now, well, I've got some good quality players around me. This is the time to play. So, listen, maybe we're going to see the best of Paul Pogba over the next while. And of course, maybe if his agent is eager for him to get out of there, he'll say, "Listen, Paul, you got to play good, mate, for the rest of the season." So, I suppose there is hope there for him.
Steve-O, great stuff. What's your first game up as a Premier League commentator again?
I've got Chelsea versus Aston Villa, which should be a good game. Looking forward to that one.
Brilliant. And the Premier League is back. We're going to have 2 live matches every Sunday, and we're going to bring you the biggest midweek ties. Manchester City against Arsenal is live on OTB next Wednesday. I presume Nathan gets that one. Is that how the hierarchy works, Steve-O?
Oh, he always gets the big game.
He always gets the big games.
I'll bow to his seniority here on.
It's going to be live on air, online, and on the OTB Sports app. Stephen Doyle, thanks a million. So this Friday at midday, we're going to have another edition of Know Your Football, where you'll have the chance to win the rollover prize of $2,000. 15 football-related questions, and all you've got to do is answer all 15 correctly. Keep an eye on our social channels throughout the week to find out how to register to play. Know Your Football is brought to you in association with Paddy Power. Check out paddypower.com for the great offers, and always gamble responsibly. Up next, we're going to be joined by League of Ireland legend and recording artist Stuey Byrne. But first, John Myler got the chance to spend some time with the Liverpool coaching staff and got the opportunity to talk hurling with Jurgen Klopp. Have a listen.
Yeah, that was where I was introduced to Klopp, really, and suddenly you see 6'3" German guy with glasses, a big tall guy. So his presence automatically, Joe, has a power, has a charisma about him. And, it's meeting a guy like that. He stands up straight, 6'3", huge presence, huge aura about him. And then we just started off talking, about everything really. And, first thing we were talking about was, he was interested in my hurling background, and he was aware of the hurling, and he knew about hurling, and he had a fascination with it, a huge interest in it, and the speed of it and all of that. And I was more interested in Liverpool and the soccer than him. So the two of us were kind of asking each other questions about our different sports,
Fantastic. I mean, what a great thing to be able to sit there and chat with Jurgen Klopp about whatever. Because, I wasn't sure if this was a prize, you might get 5 minutes with him and but you get to sit there and have lunch and pick his brain.
No, but we had the pre-match about 12:30, so we had 2.5 hours to go. And when the pre-match was over, we went down to the dressing rooms at 1 o'clock. So all of the players were hanging around the dressing rooms, but myself and Jurgen were in I don't know what you would call it, your room basically it, where we were changing. And so we started off talking about, you know, analysis and statistics and, you know, GPS, all of that, and, you know, the high performance. And I was more and more interested in that, about how he was measuring Liverpool. And, you know, because I'd heard from David about going back before in the Premiership about, you know, Monday morning they were looking at GPS, how much did the guy run? And it wasn't much different with Klopp. So we were talking about the GPS, we were talking about the work rate, we were talking about discipline, all of that, and the speed of the game, and, you know, so it was fascinating from that point of view, and the number of people that he had working in terms of high performance in Liverpool. So, you know, he had a lot of people working for him in that area. So he had instant access to information straight away, you know.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. OTB Sports Radio.
If you're feeling a little like you're going a bit stir crazy, take a break and listen to Richie's Isolation Mix. 1 hour of ad-free music every day from midday on OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the Go Loud app.
Cartilage and bone health are important for keeping the spring in your step. Joint Ace from the nutritional experts at Vitabiotics is uniquely formulated with glucosamine, vitamin C and D and copper to help maintain healthy bones, cartilage and connective tissues. Ideal for maintaining an active lifestyle. Keep a spring in your step with Joint Ace in your local pharmacy, in-store and online.
OTB AM.
You're welcome back, 9:20 on this Thursday morning, and we are about to be joined by Stewart Byrne. His album Maybe Not Today is live wherever you get your music, and here's a taster. This is Forgotten. That is The Forgotten. That is the voice of Stewart Byrne. His brand new album, Maybe Not Today, is out now. Stewart, you're very welcome to the show and congratulations.
Hey, Owen, yeah, thanks very much. I'll have to get used to that, listening to myself back, something that I'm not really too familiar with.
How does that feel, listening to yourself back, and is it something that you've got any bit comfortable with yet?
Yeah, ish. Over the you know, during the period of writing and going through the album, I've had to get used to it, because it's something that I would have been would have had difficulty with before, and probably explains why I'm doing this later in life rather than when I was probably younger, like, you know. But it's definitely a huge part of the process that you have to kind of build a sort of inner confidence when you're within yourself, without building this arrogance, I suppose. But it's only something that comes with time. I felt it's something that came with time, and definitely going through the whole process of doing the album, I got a little bit more comfortable with it, you know.
Maybe Not Today has been a project that's been in the work for quite some time. How long are we talking here? 2-3 years? And like you mentioned, there's something about your early life. This is something you've wanted to do for quite some time, even before the creative process started.
It is, Owen. Yeah, it's something that's always been in me. I mean, I learned to play the guitar when I was 17, 18, and I started even writing back then. Even one of the songs on the album, the second track, I Could Never Be, I wrote when I was 19. So I always had this in my head, and that song is probably a song that's sort of it planted a seed in me that one day I would have to do this. And then just life just kind of gets in the way. Things happen. You know, I wasn't particularly confident when I was younger that I could do this kind of a thing. So it was always a kind of a difficulty for me. Like, I'm not that kind of person who can kind of go into a room and pick up a guitar and say, you know, hey, let's get a sing-song going. I'd be kind of quite the opposite. I'd have to be sort of almost dragged to pick up a guitar and sing a song, like, you know. So I think the football career kind of was something that kind of took off and did well. But this was always at the back of my head. I always continued to write, even in the background. It's something I did. Even as a hobby, I would sit down privately and just kind of write and sort of sing to myself. Really, I couldn't even sing in front of my wife at some stages. It's something that I had a lot of difficulty with, because I just didn't think I had a good voice. Didn't think I was any good at it, you know. And then I don't know, something triggered in me about 3 years ago. I think I went to see the Hot House Flowers in Vicar Street. That might have helped, and I'd be a big Hot House Flowers fan, and I was kind of looking at Liam O'Wanley, who was probably one of the best Irish musicians to ever come out of this country, like, you know. And his voice was like he was 21 again. I couldn't believe it. Like, you know, here's this man. I don't know how old Liam is. Liam's probably in his mid 50s now. Like, he could even be older, could be younger. I'm not too sure, but I was just taken aback by it, and I took that as inspiration to pick it up again and say, I'm gonna complete what I always wanted to do. So I started writing. I had a few songs from, I had probably 5 or 6 songs from a number of years ago, and just gradually through a process, just took a step forward, took a leap of faith, and started to put it together.
That's remarkable. Like, those moments of inspiration, a lot of people can have, but sometimes that inspiration can fade away after a couple of hours or after a couple of days or weeks. How did that manage to stay in you for so long, to the point where you managed to see this thing through to the end? And not only that, but to find that inner confidence to be able to tell people about it and to be able to perform in front of other people.
So I think that helped. So believe it or not, it's funny you should say that. You know, I was finding that's what was happening. I was sort of dropping it after a day or two, or a week, or a couple of weeks, and I don't know, on something. The album is called Maybe Not Today. And the first song is called Maybe Not Today, because that was almost like my motto, maybe not today. And I kept coming back to that. You know, I wasn't finishing things. I wasn't going through with it, like you said, and I didn't have the confidence to kind of go through with it. I think people would just think this will, you know, we'll just kind of write it off. So those little seeds started to plant in my head, and I think the going to see the Hot House Flowers and it sort of just triggered something that was in me. There's also, like, I mean, personally, there's been a lot going on in our lives since I know we're going through a very, very difficult time now, but since the last downturn, which is 08, 09, a lot would have went on in our lives, kind of coincided with me returning from football. And we had to kind of move out of the house at the time. We'd been renting for 10 years, and it was a very, very difficult period. And I think I was primarily focused on trying to kind of correct that problem, and, you know, try and get a career back, get some sort of stability in our lives with the family. And I think I was very much kind of focused on that at the time. And then in the last 2 or 3 years, I've been able to kind of switch back to myself, I suppose, and just kind of focus on this. And it's just accelerated in the last couple of years. And I just got really, I kind of got a little bit obsessed by it. It's kind of, it will be part of my character that if I do focus on something in particular, I can kind of see it through. And this was my focus. And I really, I just enjoyed it so much. I really enjoyed the whole songwriting part of it. Just sitting down on this particular couch even, and just sort of singing to myself. And then I felt that Nuala, my wife, was kind of always at me that, you know, you need to do something about it. And she was pushing me all the time, and she's been fantastic. And I don't think without her I'd have been able to do that, really, to be quite honest. But it was just a process over a couple of years on. It was just day by day. I got more confidence. I started to do things about it, started to reach out to producers. I'm very naive to the whole process. I still don't understand it, but I mean, it wasn't. That wasn't the hope when I began doing this. The hope when I began doing this was that I'd probably get some sort of inner satisfaction with myself, that I've always wanted to do this, and I would get this, huge sense of satisfaction from releasing an album, a whole block of work, which is what I have gotten out of it.
How does that? Sorry, go on, Adrian.
No, I was just going to say that I listened to it last night. Good morning to you, by the way, and congratulations on it. I listened to it last night, and it's a great listen. I really enjoyed it. And we'll get to Superstar in a minute, obviously. That's the whole point of this. Maybe the context of what you've just explained there is the answer to this, but it feels quite melancholic. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, very much so. And that's probably my personality. There's a very melancholic. It's very up and down, very happy, very sad. So that's exactly how I would describe it. And what I try to do is that the essential message, or the primary message, is the happy, is the positive. So there's the songs that touch on very sad moments, but ultimately they accentuate the positive or the happy side of things. I would hope that was the hope of each individual song or the album itself.
Is there like a therapy almost in it then, if you're saying that's kind of part of your personality almost, and you've touched on the stuff that you've been through over the last few years? Are you finding it therapeutic, or is that just too far a stretch?
No, it's not too far a stretch. It's absolutely therapeutic. Yeah, I mean, that I did this for myself. I started to write this for me because I felt that just even sitting down for an hour. So this is something I really struggle with. I can't stand still for 20 minutes. Just always have to be doing something. And so I felt that this was the best way for me to kind of just sit still, take a bit of time for myself, articulate what was going on inside my mind. And it was a great way of, coming to peace with certain things. Other people write books, and I couldn't write a book. I wouldn't be able to do that. I don't think I'd be able to do it anyway. I think it would. I would be a bit worried about what would come out in a book. So I think the writing through music was a perfect way to sort of articulate how I felt, or try and express myself artistically. Because music is subjective, so you don't have to. With true music, you don't have to get right to the point of how you're feeling. You can do it in a different way, and people can understand it in a different way. And that's the wonderful thing about it. So it's I found it to be the perfect medium for me to express myself.
Yeah,
I love that. Sorry, I love that you went to see Liam O'Wanley, the Hallow's Flowers, like one of the greatest Irish musicians of all time, and you thought, yeah, I could do that.
I can't do it. No, well, not that he can do what he can do. It was more, I think it was just more an inspirational thing. It was like, I suppose the way of looking at it, music industry, it's not necessarily ageist. Sport can be ageist, you can be done by 30, and that can be a psychological thing. I mean, that was something that, even playing football, there was just this, you kind of knew when you were getting closer to 30 or early 30s that you were kind of done, and as hard as you tried, it's very difficult to kind of overcome that. Whereas I feel there are industries that aren't ageist at all, and you can actually get better with age in certain things. Music and film, acting will be kind of similar industries. So I don't know, something just triggered, and it was that moment, and I felt, what, I'll take a leap. I'll take a leap of faith. I'm going to step forward, and I'm going to go ahead with this, and you kind of, things go through your head as well. You kind of feel that, there's an element inside you saying, "Oh, don't do this." Coming from the football background, there'd be plenty of people ready to have a pop at you, and I found it to be kind of the opposite. There's a kind of a relationship between the two. There's a lot of similarities between performing as a footballer and performing as a musician.
How so?
Because there's a lot of rehearsal and preparation towards a gig or a performance at the end of the week. So, when these guys go out on a stage, and do what they do. A lot of it is talent, and because there's something that they have in them, but a lot of it is rehearsal and preparation and getting everything right, which is very similar to what you would do, like maybe as a footballer. You're kind of training every day, building up through the week to kind of perform on a Friday, on a Friday night, for example, for an hour and a half, which again would be very similar to the length of time that maybe a gig might be. That's what I use in my head. I kind of use the experience from the football to kind of relate that to the music. Now, the one thing I would say about football is that I wasn't a very expressive player when I played football. I wasn't the most skillful or talented. I had different attributes, so it was difficult for me to kind of express myself artistically as a footballer, but I feel through music I can do that because it's just me on my own, and it's just me expressing what's going on inside my head.
This is very much putting words into your mouth, but is there a situation sometimes with sport, particularly before the last 10 years or so, where there is a sort of restriction, like you mentioned there, not being an expressive player, but kind of beyond that, even in the dressing room mentality, would you have, for example, felt afraid to tell your teammates that music was something you were interested in pursuing and felt restricted that way?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Owen. It is. My football career basically spanned a huge transition in the game. I mean, I started off at Bohemians in '94, when it was just completely part-time, and there was a completely different attitude to football back then. And then as it's kind of come through the ages and evolved, the professionalism of the games come in. There's been huge changes, but I think your point is perfect. There would have been an element of me that would not that I wouldn't have admitted it. I just wouldn't have spoken about it. Now, not to say that if I had have talked about it, people would have. I probably would have got a bit of stick for it. Yeah, to be quite honest with you, now that I think about it. But I did bring the guitar on the odd pre-season trip, believe it or not. But I kind of quickly stopped doing that. I kind of because going back to what I said previously, I'm not the kind of person who can kind of go into a group of people and say, let's get living on a prayer going, or whatever the case may be. I just can't do that, or some people are brilliant at that, and that's their thing, and they're they're the great people to have around, but I can't do that. So I quickly realized I can't bring the guitar with me anymore, because people are pulling out, expecting me to sing this song and that song and whatever the case may be. But
that's a really good point, Stewie. Just because you're not an extrovert doesn't mean you can't be incredibly creative.
That's really what I've gotten out of this process on. I am introverted as a personality, and I found it. I was constantly looking to try and find a way to kind of that suited me, and everyone's individual. Everybody's different. What I could do that would help me, that could help me express myself. And this was it, and I kind of always knew this was it, but the fact that I've been able to have this time over the last 2 or 3 years to go and do this was brilliant for me. It really was. It was the best thing. It's probably one of the best things I've ever done in my life, really.
Yeah, it's not unusual, Stewie, either. Do you know what I mean? I think people tend to assume that because you can stand up on stage and perform to a crowd musically or whatever, that you have to be this extrovert. But I mean, some of the greatest musicians of all time have been exactly that type of character, who would rather just disappear into the ether afterwards. That it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be that extroverted thing. We mentioned a bit earlier on about Wes Hoolahan, and anybody who's listened to Off the Ball for any duration of time over the last number of years will know that you're a leading member of the fan club, obviously, and have had a front row seat for much of his career. Something Special, moulded from the street. It's a great song. It's third or fourth song of the album. How long have you been sitting on that one?
Oh, a couple of years, yeah. I think that was one of the earlier ones I did. I think I wrote that about 2.5 years ago. Yeah. obviously spoke about Wes an awful lot on your show with regards to his career, and like I say, I've been very lucky to kind of play with him as a footballer and have a front row seat. Just watched him, like, you know. But I think there's something a lot deeper there as well. I think, you know, Wes kind of broke the stereotype. You know, he could very easily have gone down a different path. He's an inner city lad, and there's an awful lot going on in your life when you're a young teenager growing up in the inner city. There's people, you know, all it takes is just one bad turn, and you're in a bad way. So I think what's very special about him and his career is that he broke that mold, and he managed to achieve something incredible, to be quite honest with you, because he didn't do it the easy way, Adrian. Like, you know, people will probably forget that when Wes left Shelbourne, he left Shelbourne, I think it was in the May of 2005, and it all happened very, very quickly. He went to Livingston, you know, for a very, very small fee, and up in Scotland, and he had to kind of really go through his career the difficult way, you know. But he did it. I think he's done it with you know, he's very modest, Wes, like, you know, and even when you speak to him, like, he doesn't get involved in negativity, whatever. He's very much a positive character, like, you know. And I think
the context, Stewie, to his upbringing, the key. I mean, it's a difficult one, right? Because it can, in terms of his creativity that you were talking about earlier on the pitch, like, that can be the context to what a, like, free-flowing sort of force of nature almost that he was. But I could easily see it going the other way as well, because the pressure of trying to get out of that lifestyle could obviously, you know, have made him a very functional professional, which he really was not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there's one thing, like, his mother and father are very loving. Like, I mean, I would have met his mum and dad on a few occasions, and they're lovely people. They're very grounded people, you know. And I think they were a huge factor in it, like, you know. But Wes's character is very he's very quiet, like, you know, and he you know, when you think of it, of a young Wesley Hoolahan growing up, you know, he's quite a small guy, you know, and, you know, he had to learn how to defend himself, probably from a very early age, and he probably used football as a defence mechanism. You know, we've all sort of been there, even in school, where you know, those who play football, I suppose, seem to get this kind of free pass from others that may be subjected to bullying or whatever the case may be. So I think his defence mechanism probably was his wonderful skill and ability to play football, and people probably just looked at him and said, "She's, you know, probably taking it back," you know. But even at that, it wasn't easy, you know, for him to kind of to get to where he got to, which was an Irish international, which was the best player in the Irish team, and to play in the Premiership. You know, he went down a route of going through the back door, really, to be quite frank, going up to Scotland, to Livingston. Then he moved on to Blackpool, where he spent 10 years in the lower leagues. But I think what he's achieved, coming from where he's come from, he's very inspirational, especially to the community that he comes from. I think that was the kind of primary message, that to the people around him, he is a wonderful example of what can be achieved if you kind of, you just put your head down and you really believe you can go somewhere.
Has he heard the song, Stewie, or does he know about it?
I don't know, actually. So this is typical me. I would never send it to him. Sure. I wouldn't do it. I know he knows about it. I would never. So I would just chat with him on text and see how he is and that kind of stuff. But I wouldn't send it to him, because I don't think he'd probably be, knowing the character that he is, he'd probably get quite embarrassed by it. So I wouldn't want to do that to him. So I know he's home. We're actually supposed to play a game, believe it or not. For Beaumont Hospital, Shelbourne are putting together a charity game in November. He'll be home for that, I think. So we might have a little chat about it then, hopefully.
And Has football informed any other songs that you've written, or is there any part of the game at all that has kind of made up, even lyrically, or the way you think about putting together some of the tracks in the album?
No, I think Superstar and probably Rules of Survival will be the two really that I didn't really want this to be a football thing. That's kind of it's a conflict I have in my own head. Believe it or not, like it's like from the outset I knew straight away. I mean, I obviously talk to you guys all the time. I do TV with RTE, and people. What I found quite difficult is that people have this perception of you. You play football. You're the analyst. And that's how they kind of can't compute that you're suddenly doing music. Well, that's what I found. Now, I could be completely wrong, but maybe that's a kind of a paranoia or a naivety in my own brain that I kind of need to work with. But so that transition from somebody perceiving you to be somebody else, I found has been I wouldn't say a difficult thing. It's just sort of I kind of wanted the music to speak for itself. I didn't want football to be a huge part of it. I obviously have to play on my experiences in life, and football is a huge part of my career. And I've experienced huge ups and downs through football. And I think the ups and downs come true in the album, but not necessarily in a football context.
You said that the album's given you great inner satisfaction. Has it also given you a bit of a bug that you want to go on and do more?
Yeah, well, it does. It does. I mean, the whole point of doing the album was to, I was just trying to inform myself about what I would like, what I wouldn't like, what I was good at, what I was not good at. So I used that actual process to kind of just to see where it would take me. Really, it was genuinely a leap of faith in that sense. I didn't want to go into it too. I don't want to be obsessed about getting airplay, or I'm not interested in popularity contests, which social media will drive you down that route. I just literally wanted to kind of produce a block of content and something that I could be really proud of and see where that would take me. Now, the current environment that we find ourselves in now has just completely changed everything. So this is life. Life just throws these things at you all the time. And so this is just another hurdle for us to overcome. It's another hurdle for me to overcome. So I don't know really where it'll go. I would have dealt with some musicians during the process. I worked with a producer called Michael Heffernan for the whole album, and he was fantastic. He was just kind of such a talented guy, such a grounded guy. North Dublin lad, which always fits the bill. But he was wonderful to work with, and he was so good at articulating how I was feeling. But when I chat to him now, even with because of this whole COVID thing, the music industry has just been chucked on its knees. It really has, and I, as of yet, don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So it's just so difficult for anybody who's involved in music and depends on it for their career. I don't know where this is going to go. I really don't know where. I don't know where the music industry is going to go. It had been changing all the time anyway. People consume music in such a different way, and that has been evolving year on year all the time. I find it very difficult to anticipate or to predict where people are going to be consuming music in a year.
Yeah, it's a good point. And also the whole process of parting with your own money for music has just nosedived with no live events over the last few months. So it's going to be interesting to see how quickly they get back up and running and if there's going to be any other alternatives. We also want to chat to you a little bit about football, Stewart, because there's a couple of interesting stories that we can touch on with you. Like, football is going to come back behind closed doors next week. As we know, it's going to come back in Ireland, hopefully before the end of the summer as well, behind closed doors as well. But we're also very much living in the era where we're having so many conversations about racism in the aftermath of the George Floyd killing. And these kind of two worlds converged in your career when you go back to 2009, I think it was, for a Europa League playoff, when you go to Steaua Bucharest, which was an empty stadium because there had been racial incidents at the stadium before that.
Yeah, so I think the Black Lives Matter movement is obviously it's decades late, but it's wonderful that it's finally starting to get some traction that it deserves and that it needs. I mean, obviously, true. The football culture is something that really needs to be addressed, and not just in relation to racism. It's just in relation to the general attitude of supporters at games, to be quite honest. But I did have a very, very difficult experience. Well, I mean, I'm sure Joseph and Doyle and Curtis Fleming had an even more difficult experience. I played at Shels in 2005. It was actually, we played away to Steaua Bucharest, and Joseph was basically booed and Curtis were booed for the whole game, pretty much by the crowd. They were kind of shouting monkey chants at them, and it was awful, absolutely awful, like, you know. And it's something that when it happened at the time, you don't know what to do. You're completely confused. You kind of hope that maybe the officials step in, or maybe even the sort of the hierarchy within the football club, Steaua Bucharest, maybe could have announced something, but nothing was ever done of it. And in subsequent years, like you mentioned there, we went to play even for Pats. We played Bucharest again in 2009, and we ended up playing the game in an empty stadium over in Bucharest. So it was a 30,000 seater stadium, which was completely empty because they'd been banned for this exact same thing that happened probably 5 years previous, you know. So I think this is just one example in a football context that it hasn't been addressed at all, you know, and hopefully it will be addressed now. But I think on top of addressing racism in football, I think we also need to have just look at general abuse in football, because it's just some of the things you hear coming out of the mouths of supporters at games is vile, you know, and it just shouldn't be tolerated. It shouldn't be tolerated. It's very difficult for families who sit in a stadium, and they, you know, a guy 3 seats down is roaring vile abuse at the football player. It's very difficult for them to do anything about it. So I think it's something that collectively the football family needs to address, and hopefully that's something that they do.
Yeah, like what do you do, Stewie, is the question, isn't it? Because like if we were chatting about it in last week's show, like bans obviously is the go-to thing for sport. We're going to give those fans a lifetime ban, but it doesn't really address the problem.
Yeah. I think the educational side of it is huge, Adrian. I think these guys just genuinely have been. These people have been reared in such an awful way. The way they think is just beyond comprehension for me, or for anyone that really understands anything about culture or whatever the case may be. So I think there definitely has to be a punishment element of it. Whether the punishment element of it involves an education, trying to educate these people, I think is that could be important. But it's definitely one of the biggest tasks that we have. If you're talking about from a football point of view, it's a huge task for the football family to address. It really is. Because I think it plays. There's a lot more at stake here. We're trying to attract more people to come to watch football games here. Like, we want to get more children coming to games, more families coming to games, and people will go on about people go on about the facilities, whatever. But I think the general atmosphere that people will come across at games is a difficulty. Some of the games can be fantastic for atmosphere. I mean, you know, guys singing at full voice. But there are times, you know, and there's no point in hiding behind it, when you can go to a game and you can just hear somebody shouting absolute vile abuse at a young 18, 19-year-old kid, or whatever the case may be, and that can't be tolerated, and it shouldn't be tolerated by the supporters.
What was the game, Stewie, sorry, that you mentioned? That was it a specific game where Joseph and Curtis have been subject to that abuse? Yeah,
so it was the Bucharest away game.
Yeah.
It was It happened in 2005, and they subsequently got, I think they got a fine for, I think it was 20,000 euro or something at the time. It's just piecemeal.
What stage of the game did it happen? Was it all the way through it, or?
So I remember it coming. I think it escalated when Joseph came off the bench. So I remember it being a second half thing. Although Curtis had said that he was getting abused in the first half, but it's funny because it just happened to be the way it turned out. Curtis was playing right full, so obviously in the first half he was the furthest part away from the bad element within the crowd, and then obviously in the second half he was on that side, and it escalated in the second half, like, you know. But
and you're chatting about it then, Stewie. Are you talking about it at half time? Are you talking about it on the pitch?
Do you know what, Adrian? I was actually trying to think about it now. Funnily enough, I wasn't part of the conversation. I don't know what happened in the dressing room after the game, because I was taken away for a drug test. Myself and Jason Byrne were pulled off the pitch when we were walking off, and we were gone for an hour and a half. So to this day I don't know what. I know we had conversations about it on the bus and in the hotel afterwards, but I believe the guys were extremely upset in the dressing room after the game, like, you know. But they obviously had their teammates to kind of try and to talk about. But it doesn't matter. I mean, these would have been experiences that they probably have been experienced their whole lives, and I can't understand that, because I haven't lived that life, so I can't pretend to know that I understand it. But I try to understand it as best I can, like, you know. But it was very, very, very difficult for them.
One last one for me on that one, and we must actually have them on and have a chat with them about it. Was it they were upset obviously afterwards, and it's not something that any player or anybody in any walk of life should have to go through, but it does suggest that maybe, and I definitely don't want to be putting words in your mouth, because we had our own Taoiseach stand up obviously in the Dáil a couple of weeks back and say that we need to take a strong hard look at ourselves before we start pointing fingers at others. But was it something then that was at odds with their experiences in Ireland, or was it something that you were aware of that would have happened around the League of Ireland?
I think there's no point in us kind of pretending that we're not a racist. It does happen in the League of Ireland. It happens here. There's no doubt it happens here, and it's something that we have to, it's something that we have to address as people. Like, you know, we have this fantastic sort of. We're well known throughout the world for being, very welcoming people, hardworking, full of the crack, whatever the case may be. But there's no doubt about it when it comes to racism. It is an issue here. It's a big issue here. And I think I'm even learning myself now throughout what's going on now about how I should conduct myself better when it comes to these things. So I think one of the messages that's coming out is that people don't need to just be against racism. They need to be anti-racism. So we need to kind of proactively stand up and say it's wrong. You know, somebody who's out of line, who thinks that they aren't being offensive when they're talking about something, that we have to kind of change that. And it's a people thing. Only people can change this. It's not something that's gone. I don't think forcing it on people is going to make much of a difference. I think people need to kind of educate themselves, and it's a conversation, I suppose, that has to happen. I mean, look, I've a lot of faith that we can do this, because we've done such we've changed so much about our own culture in the recent years, especially when it comes to the LGBT movement and gay marriage and things like that, like, abortion. We've sort of taken on these kind of conversations head on, and this is another one that we're going to have to take on.
For sure. Stewie, it's been great chatting with you this morning. Thanks a million for being so generous with your time. Congratulations once again on the album. It is Maybe Not Today. It is out right now. Stewart Byrne, thanks a million.
Thanks, guys.
Stewart Byrne there on the line. As I said, Maybe Not Today. It is out now, and if you're not sure where to get it, just have a look on our social feed and we will be able to grab it. Some story, Adrian, isn't it? To have all this inside you for so long and then to be able to put it out in such brilliant fashion, possibly 20 years after you'd first started writing songs, is amazing.
That's class. And there's almost an element of Stewie there that's sort of beating himself up to a degree that he didn't do it a bit earlier in his life. But the reality is that most people actually sit in that stuff for their entire life. Yeah. Books, songs, whatever, and never do anything about it. So he's absolutely to be applauded. And so I listened to it last night, and do recommend that you head along to Spotify, check it out. Good listen. Absolutely. Adrian, you're going to be back tomorrow morning. It's like your ears are not deceiving you. It is a Thursday morning. It is not Friday with Adrian Barry on OTB AM. He will be back again tomorrow morning. So looking forward to that. Won't ask you what's coming up for your weekend until then, but we got a jam-packed show once again for you tomorrow morning from 7:30 on all our social channels. If you missed anything from this morning's show, you can catch it back on the OTB AM podcast. Just download the OTB Sports app and subscribe to OTB AM to get it every morning. We timestamp it so that you can skip through to whatever part of the show you want. And that Stewart Byrne chat, if you're just joining us, is well worth listening back to the full thing. OTB AM live weekday mornings from 7:30. You can also listen or watch on the show live on the OTB Sports app, as well as all the other usual places. Chat to you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
OTB AM. This is OTB